Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another awesome episode brought to you by the Pseudo Killers. A joint effort between PK officials and the PK Army, believe it or not, which is pretty amazing. And tonight, we're just going to continue on our conversation utilizing the source material, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett. And we're going to discuss some pretty awesome, interesting, and maybe even personal things or things that you definitely can relate to in this episode. So, just sit back and enjoy. But before we get started, what it do to the panel? I see we got Chilimwe, Colonel is in the house. Marcus, what it do? How you doing tonight, Marcus?
What's good, Juju? How you?
Good. Repeat that last name for me, because I know I'm getting it wrong, like I was getting trapezium wrong.
Chilawambe.
Chilawambe. Y'all forgive me. I gotta practice. But my driving is getting much better. I know y'all saw that, right? That was like a flawless opening.
I want to shout out to the chat and the rest of the panel. I hope y'all enjoy the show. It should be good. We're going to touch on some things that we see both in our community and around the world today. So I hope y'all enjoy it.
Yeah. And also another Pseudo Killer official. We got Mac Rob in the house. Thank you for joining us. How you doing tonight? If you want to say something to the folks, go right ahead.
Hey, what's up, good people? Glad to be here. Peace to everybody. Looking forward to a good show. Hoping to learn some things and if I can contribute as well. So thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And of course, the only, I said that wrong, but the one and only, none other than, that's how I was supposed to do that. Bruce is in the building.
Hey, what's going on? Fired up, ready to go. I'm especially fired up for this show because we're delving into the topic of children a little bit more. That's something we all can relate to. So I'm fired up, ready to go, ready to get this started, put this in the archives and get to the next show.
Facts. So, of course, ladies and gentlemen, this show is titled How Little Brains Are Wired, Our Responsibilities and Future Implications. And once we start really getting into the show, you'll see why we titled that. But to get right into it, we're actually going to be delving more into plasticity, really, and telling you exactly how a child's brain or baby's brains are wired and those mechanisms that play a part in actually, wiring them. They wire themselves, but with the systems, like we had this little back and forth in the chat because I was like, I didn't want to put wire themselves because they don't, because this and that, you know what I'm saying, helps with wiring, then how is that they're wiring themselves? But that was kind of in my head to conceptualize it. So they wire themselves, it's just on the outside, but they also have influence to how they wire themselves. Yeah, I think that's a little bit more clear. So we're going to get right into it. Did anyone else have anything else to add before I go ahead and dive right into it real quick?
Yeah, on a side note, Mac Rob is one of my top 3 pseudo killers. I'm just going to leave that there.
I'm scared to ask the first 2. No, I ain't going to go there.
I'm not going to do it. I'm going to just leave that there. Mac Rob, through interactions with him and listening to him speak from a distance, top 3.
He definitely in my top 3 too. Mac Rob, for real.
Wow. That's pressure, y'all. That mean a lot. That's a lot of pressure.
You've been consistent. Consistency is important.
And that's out of respect, because me and you have talked, right? So I know what you're doing and what you finna do if you ain't already doing it now. And that's pretty big, and I commend you and I applaud you. And I'm proud to say that I know you. So yeah.
I appreciate that, Juju. I forgot to the announcement hasn't happened, but the list came out and I was number 1.
Yes. You know, I was waiting, right?
Let's
I ain't
go,
want to
bro.
I ain't trying to. I didn't
Let's
want to put it
go.
out
Very
there
nice.
because your
Yeah.
secrets are safe with me always. I
Did
be
good. You
mum's
did.
the word.
Very nice.
But you know what I was talking about. But that's awesome. So yeah, you don't have to put it out there though for the people. So soon y'all will find out. We'll just keep y'all, anticipating and waiting. But trust me, it's something good. It's real good. It's real awesome. You feel me? So getting right into it, now we're on chapter 3 of our source material. And like we've been doing, not only do we have the source material, but we wanted to make it more than just, average like book report. We also want to have in-depth discussions, not just for comprehension, but also to be able to like relate and maybe to be able to use these tools to figure out some of the issues that we may be having in our own lives, in our communities or whatnot. And then also look to find solutions that we may help, create or facilitate to, just lost words, but to kind of use against, these issues or these problems that we have. And this show in particular is really going to get into the meat of, later on, I have some special for y'all is the tools that we can use to mitigate some of the issues that we're going to be discussing here today. So starting off, we already know that little brains wire themselves to their world, right? And it's funny because many animals emerge from the womb having brains that are pretty much mostly wired, meaning like, they can walk already, stand up on their own, feed themselves, different things like that when you look at baby animals, right? But human brains are like literally only half wired. And it takes like a process for them to be wired to full capacity. And in science, approximately the principal wiring of the human brain takes 25 years, approximately, okay? Scientists don't really know why, or how this is, but it just is. So also, where wiring instructions come from after birth and what advantages it affords us are questions that we can answer. And we also get into this thing about nature versus nurture. Because what we do know is just that wiring isn't just a genetic thing. It has to do with also the environment we're in. And what we're sort of finding out is that environment is just as, if not more important, that's my assumption, as the genetics. Because I feel in what I've been reading, what I know is that, your genetics may have, say, one thing or whatnot, but I also realize that it's what the environment has to offer, encompass, or the things that you can do that can possibly offset what the genetics has given you. Some things, not all. Okay, so anybody want to add to that? Small synopsis, real quick.
Yeah, I want to add to that. One of the things that's dangerous with metaphors or just little sentences that we use to describe things, you have to be very careful, because just because they sound good doesn't necessarily mean exactly what it is. People have been believing nature versus nurture for a very long time. But one of the things with nature versus nurture is that's not exactly how it is. It's not really a competition. And in the book, it's kind of like they're dancing together. So they're so deeply dancing together to build the brain, to build young brains especially, that it's actually unhelpful to call them separate. So we're like, it's not nature versus nurture. It's more like nature and nurture. Right. It's
what
more
you
like
say,
nature
Brad?
and nurture. Yeah, and not versus. I was doing some research, and one of the things they're saying nature versus nurture is not actually the wrong question. It's not really what you're. It's not solely a question of whether or not we grow up in a healthy, happy, loving environment, or whether or not our parents were also prone to weight gain. It's a complex mix of the two, expressed through a phenomenon, and I'm sure you're about to get into it. Epigenetics.
You are you on point.
Hey, I just threw you the alley-oop.
You did. I'm about to go dunk.
I just threw you the alley-oop.
But definitely, he did that right on point. So as babies, genes are guided and regulated by the environment around them. And this is epigenetics. And I wanted to take right because what's so awesome about what Dr. Baird has done is not only has she just written a book, but she's also giving you a whole website that gives you kind of insight on, where she gets the material from, some other sources or whatnot to give you more deeper and better understanding. And she explains epigenetics. Brain development is a constructive process, right? It is not a pre-programmed unfolding of what is written in the genes. The environment provides input that guides genes for normal development, such as need for retinal input mentioned in the lesson. And by this, she talks about, babies, like our eyesight is not 100% fully developed, when they're born. So they need the exposure of light in order to better develop the retinal, their ability to see. So that's not one of their strongest senses coming out the womb. It's actually like, I believe, like more of smell. Smell is maybe a little bit stronger, and maybe touch, but definitely not sight at that point. It's still mildly developing. So the field that studies how environmental guides and regulates gene expression is called epigenetics. And to go on, she says your entire body, including your brain, and this is important, y'all, is made of proteins. The recipe for these proteins are found in our genes, right? For an accessible, having a gene does not guarantee that you will make its associated proteins. However, environmental input is also crucial, in fact. Most of your genetic material, your genome, makes the chemical compounds that are devoted to regulating 5% that actually contains the recipe for making proteins, largely under the influence of the environment. So the chemical compounds that attach to your DNA and turn genes on and off are called your epigenome. And you have genes that regulate how much impact the environment can have on other genes. And we're also going to talk about that a little bit later when I give you some of this, what they say, example, a correlation when they call orchids and dandelions, which I thought was pretty interesting. So for humans, genes are transcribed, and therefore the brain and the body are forged within an environment that is shaped by other humans, a topic we visit again in chapter 7, or whatnot. So right then and there, that gives you a definition of what epigenetics is and how it is important for brain development. Anybody want to add to that really quick before I move on?
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
I wouldn't dare. Go ahead, bro.
No. Go, Malcolm. Go ahead, bro.
No, I was just going to say that, I'm glad you kind of clarified that, and or that you have interpreted her information and clarified what epigenetics is. So am I right in when I heard, and I apologize, my background is a little bit.
You good.
Had to kind of step out. Did I hear you say that epigenetics is just kind of the turning on and off genes and not the creation of new genes? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that is.
Say it again. Reiterate that point, though, because I know people are confused.
So it sounds like you're saying that environment can turn genes on and off, but not necessarily. Not that epigenetics is the creation of new genes, but the turning on and off of genes that we already have. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, check. I love it.
Right.
And I'm saying that because there were people in the community that have misused that epigenetic term.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to add that one of the main factors of that turning on and turning off is the cortisol, stress.
Right.
That has a big impact on epigenetics, and as they're looking more and more into it, there's some specific studies that they've actually analyzed. A nice sister up in New York got a beautiful lab she's using to look at transgenerational epigenetic effects. But that epigenetics, one thing that we've heard about very popular was post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? We heard that by Dr. Joy DeJoy. That's kind of in line to the epigenetics. So we definitely, the science is definitely looking at that, and one of the main factors they know of is stress.
Brash, you got anything else to add real quick before I go further? And Marcus, can you go ahead and put that visual up for me if you don't mind?
No, I would say go ahead and go further. I'm just glad Malcolm is here.
Right. Marcus, did you catch that?
Yeah, it's there, Juju.
All right, thank you. So, a baby's body requires additional genes that sneak in from the outside world. I thought this was interesting, actually. So these tiny visitors travel inside baby's body by way of bacteria. And it has an effect on the brain in ways scientists are just now understanding. So right then and there are so many things that come into play as far as, developing a baby's brains. I'm just going to go ahead and put this visual up right now because we're going to be talking about some instances that have to do with this, what you're seeing, which is the prefrontal cortex. Just so you'll know, a lot of what we're going to be talking about moving forward is going to be dealing with that particular area, right? So babies' wiring instructions come from the physical and the social world. And the physical meaning like nature, and the social, which is nurture. So it's and not versus, because one doesn't outdo the other. One isn't necessarily better than the other, okay? So things like cuddling, talking, making eye contact, overall how you nurture a baby helps sculpt the brain in necessary and irrevocable ways. Genes play a key role in building a baby's brain wiring and opens the door to wire it in the context of the baby's culture. And this was interesting because she talks a lot about, and we'll get into it more later, but how culture is such a big thing. And actually, this thing becomes what, transgenerational? Is that a correct term to use, Marcus, Malcolm, or Brass, when we're talking about how culture helps influences? Because what someone did to us as a baby is kind of inscripted in us, and we tend to do the same with others or have that same influence of others in our environment. That could be good or bad, depending on what it is. Okay. Anybody want to add to that really quick?
Yeah, they like I said before, when we did neuroplasticity, it goes, you can focus a little bit on the good way, the success stories, Steph Curry, Tiger Woods, these are people who they've been hitting golf balls since they're 3 years old, shooting baskets since they've been 3-4 years old. I mean, that particular area, that particular center on their brain is so strong that now, you can look at Steph Curry shoot a shot. I mean, he could just pull up from half court, and it's just pure muscle memory. Or the arm goes the same, the wrist goes the same. It doesn't matter where. He's probably taken 1 billion shots at this point. So, when you call him the greatest shooter in the world, you can almost break it down to science. Tiger Woods, his famous story, he's been doing this since he was 3-4 years old. And now look at his son. He knows the formula, and he's doing it with his son. The problem, though, is that it also goes the other way.
Let me say this. Can I say this real quick?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Ahead. This is a little off. But if nobody has seen Tiger Woods' son play, y'all, that boy got the juice.
Mm-hmm. He's amazing. And if you put them side by side, have you seen the side by side swing with Tiger Woods and his son? It's identical. It's down to like the minute.
Wow. He may be a little better.
No. I'm not talking about the skill. I'm talking about the actual swing.
Yeah.
They put them up against each other. Mm-hmm. He has the exact same. It's exact down to the like they broke down, because with golf That's
Right.
that's where the rubber meet. Oh, I cannot believe I'm about to say that.
Go ahead.
Okay.
The rubber
Where
meets
the
the
rubber
road.
meets the road. All right, shouts to But that's where when you look at they focus on the swing or the hips in the right place. So his team
Right.
actually just won the national championship.
Yes, they did.
Tiger Woods' team. So Tiger Woods' team. But to get to the other part is that it also goes really bad, and things like when you're molested as a child. Things like where you see a lot of violence as a child. There's studies that children who witness domestic violence are more likely to commit domestic violence.
Victim
Yeah,
victimizer.
exactly. So what happens is that's why it's so. Marcus is going to get into it to it later, but so we can move this along. But you have to be very careful at those ages, and that's what I'm going to get into. Of paying attention to exactly how active the brain is when they're children and how that sticks with them for a very long time.
Mac, did you want to say something real quick?
No, I just want to say, Juju, you're killing it.
Thanks.
Nature versus nurture argument and how you just broke that down, that was perfect. And Brad, I did not know that. I did not know Tiger Woods' son was getting it in like that.
He killing it. That boy raw.
They just won a national championship last week.
Wow.
I actually watch him all the time. Wow. You know, where I come from, golf is big anyway. You feel me? But it's a very skilled sport. And even though it's everywhere, like rugby and all those other sports, especially, you know, for us and our certain communities, if you're trying to get your child to Ivy League, that was one of the sports they didn't know. Golf, rugby, even swimming. It's different now, right? Because we're growing, the world's growing. I think that's beautiful, but a very skilled sport. And I love golf. I think it's pretty entertaining. And I was a beast at it on Wii. I ain't gonna lie. I was a Wii champion in golf. I used to beat all my little cousins because I told them, just because you younger than me don't mean I ain't gonna whip your behind. You feel me? Because, you know, I had to teach them life wasn't fair. But neither here nor there.
I tore my shoulder out the frame playing Wii golf. And Wii tennis. When I tell you they don't because I didn't realize that that you got to have some resistance. I'm sitting here swinging and throwing and this, that, and the other. I woke up the next day, my arm was tore out the frame. I never played it again.
Oh my God, that Wii, no joke. That Wii is a blast though. But you know, they got the VR, whatever, the VCR goggles now and stuff. So I'm waiting on that. But getting back to it, and Brass, I'm gonna really let you go off after I finish these couple points, okay? So as information is gathered from the outside world, some neurons fire more together than others. This causes gradual brain changes we recognize as what we discussed before, but we'll go in depth, ladies and gentlemen, plasticity, right? So the process pushes a child's brain towards complexity. Meaning, like, the more plasticity you have, the more complex the brain can be. And the way it pushes the child's brain into complexity is by this thing called tuning and pruning. So you've heard it for the first time right now, tuning and pruning, but you're going to continuously hear what we mean by tuning and pruning throughout this conversation. And I'm going to get into, if not, Brass doesn't touch into, like 3 examples of how we can tune and prune our child's brain and how they're significant, okay? Tuning is strengthening the connection between neurons, particularly the ones that are used frequently or vital to maintaining a body budget. Remember, we talked about body budget from the very beginning, and this is how, you know, your brain controls metabolism and the different systems of your body, and what's the most energy efficient, right? This also means that the brain is likely to recreate those neural patterns that produce those well-tuned connections, neurons that fire together, wire together. I thought that was cute. So, and pruning is the opposite of tuning, right? So it's when less used connections weaken and they initially die off. The neural equivalent, and I always say this, doesn't have to do with your brain, but also with your body and movement and things like that. And I'm constantly telling people as we get older in age, if you don't use it, you lose it. So exactly, this is where you know, I'm believing now, the more you learn, that you're getting all these kind of cliches in life, because I'm sure somebody probably got it from a doctor, and, you know, it just became kind of like social, you know, everybody says it all the time, but really doesn't know what it means. But here we're really telling you what that actually means in the most important and significant way. Marcus, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm gonna wait till after brass.
Mac, did you want to add anything real quick? Because in a minute, I'm just going to hand it over to Brass so he can go in for a little bit on plasticity.
Yeah, man, it's almost like you read my mind about the pruning. That it's that law of nature that you either use it or you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And these, what we're learning and what you're teaching and the information, this is very useful when it comes to raising children. A lot of these concepts involving the brain. If we could take these principles and apply them to how we're bringing up our babies, I'm
Right?
pretty, as the show go on, it's going to lean even further into the development of humans throughout their life. But you know, we could do a lot. We could do a lot of good with this information. So I'm learning, y'all. I'm learning.
Well, I mean, I'm going to spoil the surprise, Rob. So we are going to discuss ACEs a little bit later on, if that kind of soothes your craving for us talking about how it'll affect our children or whatnot. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But Brass, it's all you on plasticity if you want to go in a little bit.
So, and that kind of goes into, I'm going to go into neuroplasticity. I'm going to touch on a little bit of tuning and pruning, but then the three examples, I want to try my best to stay within the book. Just so we're clear about neuroplasticity. You can have as many definitions as you'd like to figure it out, but it's very simply neuroplasticity or neuroplasticity, or even brain plasticity. You'll hear it defined in different terms, different ways each way, but it's simply the ability of neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. So it's similar to, like we were talking about. I want to share my screen real quick. We were just talking about Tiger Woods' son. I just want to show something really quickly. It's actually uncanny.
Just a moment.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So look at how they even stand the same. Look at the swing. Can you see? You can see this, correct? I can't see if you can see it or not, but look at how they swing the same, how they stand the same, they fist bump the same. You know, hold on. Look at that. You can't make that up. You can't make that up. That's not something. That's literally neuroplasticity. That's literally tuning and pruning in real time. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, let me share a different tab. When we talk about neuroplasticity, what is neuroplasticity, aka brain plasticity? It's literally the brain's ability to change and adapt. So there's one type, which is structural plasticity. That is more the experiences or memories that change a brain's physical structure. And then you have functional plasticity, and this is more along the lines of when you have a stroke. Some people have strokes, and then they have damaged parts of their brain. But then the brain has the ability through rehabilitation and specific sciences that rehabilitation centers or nurses or therapists have, that can literally teach a person to walk again, teach a person to speak again, teach a person to have the ability to do all of those things again, because that's why the brain is such a beautiful thing. That's why you have the plasticity. I'm going to show a video of neuroplasticity in real time. Let me share this tab instead. I'm going to start this over. This is actually neuroplasticity in real time. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. It's a little small, but it's literally just like we talked a little bit in the last show about how they use our brains to figure out flows of traffic, how our brains are figured out how to move planes through the air, how they basically tried to figure out traffic patterns by watching how birds flock. It's amazing how these things are all connected. If you look at this, This is almost similar to ants making an ant. If you ever cast an anthill before, I know I grew up in the country. So, you pour the silver or whatever you want down there. And when it comes out, it looks similar like this. You'll be surprised at how many things in the world operate almost exactly how. Look at the neurons, the neurotransmitters, the postsynaptics, the presynaptics, how it's all firing at the same time. There was another one in this I wanted to show. Let me see. I didn't want to show that. That's a dead person. 1 second. Let's change the screen to tuning and pruning. But just to get out of that for a second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so I can get the other video to come up. The other thing that I wanted to get into in regards to neuroplasticity is, especially when it comes to babies, when it comes to children, one of the things in regards to the pruning specifically is because the little humans have way more connections than they ultimately will use. And they're a lot bushier. Their neurons are quite bushier. They create twice as many neurons as maybe an adult would. So you actually have to prune those extra connections to make room for learning. And that goes back into the body budget. That goes into how the brain is literally there to run the organs, it's to run your body. It's literally budget the energy that it uses in your body. I was reading something earlier that Marcus shared with us that in some cases, babies, children, 43% of their body goes into 43% of the energy in their body is used in their brain, because it's such a fertile time. It's the best time for them to learn language because of their ability to appreciate sounds at that age. It's the best time to learn anything because they have their neurons are so much bushier. They have so many more connections, even with their connection to the physical and outside world. But here's the problem with the pruning, is that in this particular case, things that they don't use at a specific time are usually pruned out quicker. They're usually done. And this is where a caregiver would come in. And like Malcolm was saying, a caregiver is actually very important. See, we manage our body budget. If we're hungry, we open the fridge. If we're tired, we go to bed. If we're cold, we put on a coat. If you get agitated, you take deep breaths to calm your nerves. But for babies, they can't even burp without help. So that's where a caregiver will come in. They regulate the baby's physical environment, therefore the body budget, by feeding or setting sleep times. A caregiver is so important, even in how they teach babies how to recognize faces, how to tell the difference between faces, how to recognize a face of love versus the faces they should remind. You know how like a baby sometimes when they're being carried around a party, at a certain age, a baby will recognize their mother and father. But have you ever seen those memes or those videos where, say, a person has a twin brother, and they hold the baby? Am I the only person that's ever seen this? Where they hold the baby, it's two twins, and you hand one to the father, the kid's actual father, but then when the twin comes up, the baby will actually reach out for the twin, similar to like similar to like, because they only recognize the initial face, and then they'll look back at their father and they'll just go back and forth. So it's actually a confusing part of that. Have any of y'all have any experiences with caregivers or anything you want to add in regards to that?
I have seen that video where where the baby gets confused between the twins. They trying to see whether he selects the right one. So I have seen that. That is, interesting.
So, and even when it comes to sounds, a baby in and of itself, they don't know what sound is dangerous. They get taught what sounds are dangerous. You ever hear parents are constantly doing that? That becomes like something that they catch. So most of the time, I don't know if any of y'all have small children or had where you walk around, you spend the majority of their time stopping them because they're trying to figure it out. They're going to the bathroom, they're playing with the toilet. They're going to the plugs, they're playing with the plugs. They're doing all of those things, and what you're trying to protect while you're trying to protect them, but it's really their brain trying to figure everything out. Because at that time, they're so wide open. Everything is new. And that's where the plasticity comes in. Because neuroplasticity, it really is almost, you can almost say it is the ability of the brain to learn something new. So imagine what the world is to a newborn child. Everything is new. Every sound, every smell, every taste, everything that they see is in their physical and social world is important. So you got 3 examples of tuning and pruning. That first one was the caregiver. The second one is how you learn to pay attention. Now, an adult brain can usually focus in a crowd when someone calls their name. Scientists kind of refer to this as like a cocktail party effect. So your brain has smaller communities of neurons, so you can focus on details that are important and ignore everything else. But newborn brains don't have a spotlight. Theirs is more like a lantern. So what they do in a physical environment is they just illuminate everything. They don't know what's important. They don't know what's not. They don't know what's dangerous. I remember my brother, they still tell this story to this day about my brother still won't cook. He won't cook. He is like literally he eats out. He won't do anything because he burned his arm. Literally, he burned his arm terribly when he was a child. So he literally has a fear. He won't go near a stove. He has no interest in going near a stove. He has it's not even something like that. And what goes on is they learn that based off of that. Anybody want to go into that before I move into sharing attention?
Oh, well, so there was a lot. So both of them were really good. I want to reiterate on your first topic when they talk about the carer's responsibility. Sorry, but that's important. And I'm going to stress it if you already mentioned it, but it's our job to do our jobs as a caregiver for a baby in order to allow the baby's brain and body to do adequate body budgeting. I think when it comes later on, then when we talk about the effects of not being able to develop a sufficient and adequate body budget and those consequences. So number one example is like muy importante. You get what I'm saying? So please don't take it for granted, nurturing your child. It's funny because I'm a children's advocate, and I've worked in a daycare. I've also worked in a level 4 residential facility. So, I've seen and I've been able to recognize some things that I've seen in my own personal life or, done by others, not so much my mom. My mom was awesome, but, by others that I would not dare do, to a child, mine or not. Like, I'm never going to be one to spank or hit a child. I feel like there are other ways to deal with that, but neither here nor there. It is important that we do our due diligence to make sure that our child is safe and comfortable and adequately taken care of in order for their body budgets to develop properly. We'll get more into that later. And the second part of that, when you're talking about this cocktail effect, and so I love the way she explains this before you do move on, when she talks about, because, a child's brain is like wide open. It's like a blank canvas, right? And because a child has like twice as many more neurons than an adult in this tuning and pruning process, those neurons that are being tuned usually have bushier edges, or dendrites, right? And then the axon sheaths usually are covered in a myelin that protects them or whatnot. So then there becomes other biological process that goes into effect when these certain neuronal connections are being made in order to, better select them to survive or for them to evolve, because we've talked about that, right? And then the ones who aren't doing much of nothing, they die. That's the whole process. But, there's a blank slate here, right? And with that, then we have to guide the babies, our children, and what is important. And she says it perfectly about, pretty much it's our job to he's going to get into and share attention, let them know what's important, what to focus on, that's important for their body budget. And I thought that's pretty awesome, but I'm not going to give it away. I just wanted to say that, like, and this is why we're doing this show, because this goes into answering the questions to so many issues and problems we're encountering. And, you know, I'm not trying to go there, but maybe in our households, and if not, definitely in our communities. If you work in any type of educational system or any type of profession that deals with children, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. Like, it's prevalent, and, you know, there's things that can be done, and not just by parents. Like, so don't think, oh, because a parent ain't doing their job. No, there's things that we as a community can do. A next door neighbor, you get what I'm saying? A fellow church goer, if that's your thing, or whatever. There's things we can do. You know, no man's an island. Yeah, that's my spell. Anybody else before Brass goes on with that, though? Marcus, Rob?
Yeah, one key thing that Brass brought out was about the body budget aspect of it. Children, as they age, the amount of energy their brain consumes is less. So by the time you reach about adulthood, it's about 20%. But as a child, when they first born, I'm talking about coming out of the womb, it's about 60. And then as they age around 5, it can be around somewhere around 43.
Right.
And then as they continue. And then another thing is that there are specific periods in development in which those numbers kind of shift a little bit due to hormonal changes. One of those things is when you're a teenager. We're going to get into that later about how that shifts quickly. So sometimes when I in my experience with children, nieces, nephew, and my own children, we call it like the terrible twos, you know, and we get these names from it. But as neuroscience and sociologists and evolutionary biologists start to look at it, they're finding these shifts and changes, periods in where you have rapid neurological growth, and then you have shrinkage afterwards. And that's very important because y'all remember our previous lessons, we were talking about the brain is there to predict, right? So that it can be efficient in body budgeting, allostasis, right? So this is part of how your brain is shifting in that allostasis point. This is what it's using to make these predictions better.
Right.
That's all I wanted to bring up.
Mac, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just briefly about the body budgeting, just to add on a little bit, a couple of things. And when we talk about energy expenditure or even creation, we're talking about caloric intake. And so humans attain most of the calories from carbohydrates. And what we do is we break those food sources down to a common denominator called glucose. This glucose will enter cells in the body and help us to produce the energy we need to cry and move and kick and poop. Well, the interesting thing about the brain is it is one of the only organs, if not the only organ in the body that does not need insulin to pull this glucose into its cells. And so it immediately uses those glucose molecules to produce energy, as opposed to maybe a liver cell, or a heart or any other organ which would need insulin in order to put that glucose in. So it's so sensitive to sugar, which is what it uses to produce that energy. In fact, if you see people who have what they call diabetes, and where they take too much insulin or whatever the case may be, when their sugar gets low, one of the first signs that you'll see is altered mental status. They will seem like they're not right or not in their right mind, because that brain is so sensitive to that sugar that it needs for this high energy reserves. I just wanted to add that.
Nice.
That is a very nice piece.
Yeah.
That's a very nice piece. One of the things when we're talking about this, and this is why in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and turn the rules of cutting off and adding out, because I actually cede more to someone like a Juju. And this is not somebody, this is not where I would cede to an expert or someone in the field. I mean, I always would do that. But in this particular case, and you'll see when she gets into ACEs, people that deal with children, I come from a family of educators, whether they be principals, they're creating programs, whether they're in pediatrics. Just it's funny in my family, we focus a lot on kids. I deal a lot in children's groups. I have young politician groups and things like that. And one of the reasons why I'll see to you is because one of the things my mother has always taught me, and my aunts and uncles, is that to see how to deal with youth, you really can't do it from a behind the desk, behind the computer. You got to be out in the field, dealing with the kids, dealing with how they change. You can see how they change. One of the things when you were talking about the food, Malcolm, is my mother has always said, and I hate to turn the tenor of the conversation, but let's just have a conversation real quick before we move on. Is that a lot of times, especially in the inner city, when they do the grades for the kids in the inner cities, she said one of the things that always bothered her is that it's almost impossible for a child to learn if they're hungry. Facts. It's almost impossible. That there are kids that literally go to school for breakfast. They're not eating at home. They're not getting the proper nutrition at home. So you're trying to get this kid at 9 o'clock in the morning to focus on class. You're trying to get him to focus on what the teacher is saying.
Right.
And you're not even asking the right questions. You're not asking the question of, did this kid have something to eat last night? Has this kid only been, why is he always asleep in my class? Well, maybe he only slept 30 minutes last night. You know, so they don't take these things into account. So I will always, you can cut me off at every point of this conversation because I'm more excited about the ACEs aspect. I'm more excited of the Romanian, the rationalia. I'm glad that we have people that are out into the field. So I'm going to get into sharing attention. And then
you got to. It's important.
Notes. Right.
You still got those important facts, though, and they got to know the facts. And we can get into the examples because those are examples. And when you get into ACEs, it goes into not only recognizing the problem, but also finding solutions to it. So it's all duly important, though. So no cuts here. Go on.
No, I'm not going to cut. I'm just saying that I like the personal stories when it comes to this because people are going to watch this. And for some reason, I noticed that the chat gets particularly excited when we talk about how this affects kids.
Yeah.
But to get into sharing attention, one of the key statements is that newborn brains don't know what's important and what's not.
Facts.
So they don't have the ability to focus. And this goes back into caregivers. They constantly guide the baby's attention to things of interest. She gives the example of a mother. She'll pick up a toy dog and look at it. Then she'll look at her child and say, guiding the baby's gaze and say, hey, what a cute little doggy. Just to get them to understand that, you know, this dog is pretty. This toy could affect his body budget. So you should care about and learn about the dog. One of the side notes when she speaks is, I know she talks about the positive aspects of it, but then there are also some negative aspects too. You have to present your child with a social world. It doesn't have to be necessarily about money all the time. But, you know, you'll see as adults, you remember those trips to Great Adventure. You remember just a simple trip to the ice cream store, how much that meant and how they do it with their child. I recently went back home to Ohio to visit with my mom, and I took my son to Ohio State University, right? And it wasn't even during football season, but it was just important for me to take him, to get him a jersey, get him a Buckeye, take him to the Buckeye Donut Shop, take him to the clubs, to the clubs and the stores, eat some of the niche foods that we have there. You know, because those are the things that I want him to do with my grandson. You know, if he understands this early, then I don't have to worry about him being the fan of the team up north that I would probably disown him for, that we're going to beat on Saturday. So moving forward. Sharing attention. Hey, whatever. I'm always Ohio. Little by little.
I see you.
Sharing attention teaches an infant which parts of the environment matter and which parts don't. And this goes more into the body budget. See, you have to have a niche environment. That's what they call it, a niche. You have to have a niche environment. if you try to just to entertain every single thing, every sound, every sight, you have to separate and teach a child what's important and what's not. Because if you don't, every animal has a niche. It creates the niche that it senses the world. Adult humans have a gigantic niche, perhaps the largest of any creature. Your niche extends far beyond your immediate surroundings to include events around the world, past, present, and future. So what that means is, as an adult, we can have the ability. We have the ability to think about current events. We have the ability to think about future events. We have the ability to think about past events. We have that ability. Our niche is a lot larger than someone else. But for an infant brain is able to construct its own environment of what is relevant to its body budget and what can be ignored. So after months of practicing sharing attention with caregivers, infant will learn to elicit shared attention. So what that means is you want them to focus attention more effectively on the things that matter. Before we move on to the next thing, I just want to go into how your senses develop. One of the things that we talked about for newborns is that they don't have necessarily a specific pinpoint laser on attention. They take in all the sounds around them. They tested it in the lab, but a newborn can distinguish a wide range of language sounds. And that's part of the reason why, if you're trying to teach your child a language, it's best to try to teach it early as possible. Marcus was getting into, there's actual numbers on the ages, the early embryonic stage to 2 years. I hope you know that there is some things that say you should talk to your child. You should talk to your child in the womb. You should talk to your child before they're born. Embryonic stage to 2 years. Somebody wanted to say something on that?
I'm sorry. I just, I was in the crowd saying amen. Yes.
But I think Marcus has his hand up. I think Marcus will say something real quick.
You know what, Brash? You hitting on some serious points. As a thought experiment, I challenged my son to think about it this way. If you are a single parent who is working 2 jobs, how does that child create that niche then?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You spending this time, you must work. After you finish, I'm gonna touch on a point that I became in conflict with science myself because of my political stance, and I had to address that. But I'll wait till you finish on having to do specifically with this specific topic.
Okay. And I'm rounding this out. Part of the thing that, just on the science aspect of it, early embryonic stage to 2 years. During the first year of life, the number of synapses in the brain of an infant grows more than tenfold. By age 2 or 3, like Marcus was talking about, it has about 15,000 synapses per neuron. So it's almost at the peak level of synapses occur sometimes during that time. But then as you go 2 to 10 years, the second year of life, the number of synapses drops dramatically. So now about 50% of those extra synapses are eliminated. So like in the visual cortex, pruning continues about 60 years of age. But now you're getting into adolescence. And when you get into adolescence, pruning continues through adolescence, but not as fast as before. It begins to stabilize at that point. And then in early adulthood up until you're about 25. But I was looking at a study that says, and it's a crazy title, but it's helping me because my son is 14. He'll be 15 in probably about 2 weeks. And it says the teen brain tunes in less to mom's voice and more to unfamiliar voices at that time. So matter of fact, I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to get it over to Marcus, because one of the things I like to do, and I want to make sure that we're sharing sources, and I want people to see that this is not coming. A lot of times it's a confusion with us, that they believe that this stuff is coming from us. This is coming from the experts. Can you see that?
Yes, just a moment. Sharing.
Okay. This is from Stanford Medicine. The teen brain tunes in less to mom's voice, more to unfamiliar voices, the study finds. Around age 13, kids' brains shift from focusing on their mother's voices to favor new voices, part of a biological signal driving teens to separate from their parents. Now, if you've ever had a teen, I've had a teen, she's now 20, and now I have a teen that's firing on all cylinders. I can't get him to pay attention. His phone is the key to his
all
life.
Cylinders.
All cylinders. The phone is the key to his life. Now,
right.
This is why shows like what we're talking about is so important. We're not talking about old wives' tales. We're not talking about myths. We're talking about things that can help you get to your children before you can't. Any parent knows, especially the parent of an athlete. You see your children at breakfast, like Marcus said. You might not even see them at breakfast, but you'll see them at breakfast, and then you see them when they get home. There will come a time that if you have not, and I want to be very clear about this, if you have not imprinted on your child the things that you want them to value, the morals that are important to you, the things that'll get them through life. If you have not, and you try to do it at 13, or you try to start at 8 years old, you try to start at 9 years old, I want you to understand that you missed out on that key time where that brain is fertile, 2, 3, 1, embryonic stage. You missed out on that fertile time, and you're going to have a really difficult time because once they start getting into 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, now you're talking about puberty. Now you're talking about they're listening, their coach, the things that they're saying will end up being more important to them. The rappers on songs are more important to them.
Right.
The movies, their friends with peer pressure. Peer pressure only works if you haven't prepared your child for his peers. My father burned that into my brain. Peer pressure is only a thing if you haven't prepared your child for his peers. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to let Marcus, or I'm not sure who's going next, but I just want to push this point. And this is very important because we can be as literal and we could give you all of the information. But I'm telling you, if you have a nephew, a niece, you're the godfather to someone's child, or you have children that you hold dear, or you're a parent with children that have children, if you're at that stage, please focus on getting them involved in their lives. Let your child see as many things as possible so that they can decide. In the inner city, a lot of times, there are children, and we all know, children that have never left the block that they live on. And they take that into being an adult. As an adult, they don't think the world is that big. They don't even think they're going to live until they're 30. But then you don't realize it's not their fault. These are children who have never left. I repeat, they've never left the block that they live on. So I'm going to move on to somebody else because I can go on about children all day long. I appreciate the opportunity. If anybody else wants to add something to that, but right now I'm about to pull out my notepad and take notes. Thank you.
Go off, Brass. I ain't mad. You feel me? Those are all real facts. Did you want to, before we move, because I want to add something, but did you want to add anything really quick to that, Mac?
Nah, man, that was fine.
Yeah.
I like how you showed how we can use it in our practical world, man, and how important and vital, and how it was for each of us growing up. You know what I'm saying? That was nice. That's cool.
Marcus, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So one of my struggles was I had an issue with Trump. I'm gonna be honest, right? And it wasn't really based in rationality. It was based on my personal perception of him, right?
Right.
And so they wanted to. I have family members, or people I consider my family that are involved in both national politics and local politics. And a few years during Trump's administration, his daughter wanted to do something. I'm going to pull it up. Can Can you share my screen, Juju, please?
Yes, just a moment, please.
So this is what Ivanka Trump wanted to attempt to do, and you can read the article if you want to. You can scan the QR code. Can y'all see the QR code?
Where is it?
I can see the article now.
Okay, you can see the article, but you can't see the QR code.
No, I can't see the QR code. I see the article though.
No, I can't see the code yet.
So this is an article from Washington Post where she's talking about this program that she wanted to initiate, and it has to do with
put it back on the picture. Title picture. There you go. Picture.
It had to do with providing financial resources for women who just had a child, adopted a child, and the fathers. It was 6 weeks paid leave that the government was going to sponsor. And because of my political bias and my personal preferences, I didn't like this idea, right? And I was sitting there talking to a young lady, and she asked me why, and I really didn't have a reason. But I knew part of this information about children's brains development, how much parental care is. And so this was a conflict that I had. The United States really is behind the ball when it comes to this subject matter politically. We just had the COVID, during the COVID shutdown, during that period, they did the child tax credit, right? And the estimates of how many children was raised out of either poverty, near starvation, was astronomical by providing these resources to parents. With what we know now, it would behoove us to really look into how we can better our society. We're going to get into some examples when we don't do it, what we know through neuroscience and sociology and evolutionary psychology and biology, what happens when things don't go right. So I just wanted to show y'all and give y'all some insight on how, one, you can become biased against good information, but two, more importantly, how important it is for us to look at the most relevant information when it comes to voting, when it comes to looking at policy, when it comes to these things, because this would have, to some degree, helped with these niche events that children go through by having both parents there to help structure this critical time in growth and development.
Can you give me that prefrontal cortex picture again if you're done?
Yeah, give me 1 second, please.
Did you have anything else to add, Marcus? Or did
No.
you land your plane?
I'm done.
So I wanted to back up, also point out some real, I thought they were interesting facts, and maybe give the audience some better understanding of why, people do the things they do, so to speak. So I'm going to back up to the part where Brass was talking about, babies recognizing sounds and things of that nature and how that was important, how that would be the most optimal time also to teach them, how to do how to speak languages, because then their brain is tuning and pruning to recognizing certain types of sounds, and because their brain is open, is a blank canvas, there's so many things that we can write, draw, in their brains for their brains to wire on, and that would be languages. But one of the interesting things, and so this is where science also corrects, perhaps your biases, right? because where we may be thinking something is due to one thing, it really ain't got nothing to do with that, right?
Love it, Juju.
And what I'm talking about is because I used to always think, other people besides us were doing things because they were, racist, right? But no, it's not. They're not racist. So let me explain. Basically, the same type of process or the same area. Did you put that up for me, Marcus? Are you still looking?
No, I have it. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you. Please interrupt. Please interrupt, Colonel. You are allowed to. So this same thing that babies have going on as far as recognizing sounds is the same type tuning and pruning as recognizing faces. So the thing with that are babies, are tuning and pruning to recognizing certain faces very young. That's a good thing. But the problem with that is because most people, and this is just human nature, usually you're going to commune or be around those who are like you. So in this respect, most people are around people who are the same ethnicity. Meanwhile, I did not say race, ethnicity, right? And because of this, a child's brain usually is tuned to recognize those, typical types of feature within that group, right? So, have y'all ever I've had this experience numerous times. I've also done it. I've done it where I was little and, one of my mom's white friends, it was me and my sister, I forget. She used to always talk about this, like first time seeing them and we like cried, bawled because we did not recognize this face because it didn't look all chocolate cocoa brown like my grandma. I mean, my mom's a little light, but still, it was unrecognizable. And because of this, that's why it's important. And my grandmother was big on this, and I thank her for this. My grandmother had no fear. Like, she didn't worry about what people would think about me or think about her. Like, if she thought that it was something that was going to be beneficial, she did it. So, that's how I learned how to swim. Well, my mom actually put me in the daycare. That was predominantly anything else other that looked like me. Nobody there looked like me, but they had programs that help tune and prune. You get what I'm saying? And that help create positive niches for me. So because of my upbringing, and I was a free lunch person and a free breakfast program child. That's me. I wanted to say that earlier. I was that, but because of those things, so all the things that I went through as a child that was supposed to have me as a statistic, and I probably got a 10 on that ACE survey. I haven't actually done it, but I think I will. I didn't fall into that bracket because growing up, there were also tools and things that were aligned for me to help, how shall I put that? I want to say to help lessen the effects of whatever was going on. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't positive or pro-social in my life, and to reinforce that with things that were positive and pro-social. And that was also being around different types of people. So I'm always telling young parents, to go out, especially with their babies, especially with their young toddlers. Don't be worrying about if your toddler's not going to act perfect at the restaurant. The only way a child will know something if they're learning it. And usually children cover what they see, meaning when they see an adult doing it, then that's how they learn, and they would usually mimic and learn that. So that's why it's important also to do things that are positive and pro-social around them while your children are looking, but also get them out into the world so they can experience different things, see different people, and to be able to develop these popular niches. But I just thought that was so funny because, I, again, in doing these shows, learn valuable lessons. So, I apologize if I ever cussed any white person out for thinking I was somebody else, because it wasn't your fault. You just...
No, that's so important. What you just said is so important.
Right.
We can be as technical as we want, Juju, but these shows, like Malcolm said, if we don't show how to put this stuff to practice in real time, I mean,
Yeah.
we're literally, what people do you know are publicly, literally talking about? I had to rethink Trump.
Right.
That's a tough
Right.
statement.
I had to rethink it too, or at least his daughter. Like,
You
shoot,
gotta
if he ain't
rethink. You gotta
stretching,
rethink it. So it's like,
I need to get his daughter on board, like, because I like that, and that's important, right? And we get way more into that, but I just had to bring that point up, Brass, because it wasn't their fault, y'all.
It's very important. It's very important.
It wasn't their fault. Are you gonna? Did you have anything else to show on plasticity? Were you getting to?
No, because we're about an hour and 15 in. So just to move the conversation along, we're going to be doing a bunch of shows. We can come back to a few things, but I want to get into you guys' conversation and move a little bit forward now.
Okay, I get it, but there's something that I just don't want to miss, and this is one thing I'm not going to miss, and that's sensory integration.
Go ahead. I see to you. Go ahead.
And then Marcus, you're going to be up right after that, but I want to give people this bit of food to nibble on. So sensory integration is when your brain assembles different sensory sensations. And y'all will get while I'm reading this, why this is important, okay? So just follow with me, right? So again, it's your brain assembles different sensory sensations as a cohesive whole, like a kiss. And this example was used because, like, when you kiss someone, you feel me, like you feel the touch of their lips, like, and sometimes you can taste it. And I'm not trying to be sensible, y'all. Just, you know, just
go ahead. Go ahead. I know where you're going with this.
Because, you know, I already know the sound of my voice and how that can go. But no, but you know, you can feel them, you can almost taste them, you can smell them, right? And then it's also this sensation that goes through your body, you know, like the butterflies you get, especially if it's somebody you like, you know what I'm saying? Or if it's like a first date and y'all have that kiss, right? All these things tie into sensory integration. So itself is tuned and pruned as babies grow, the sensory integration. And that was more for adults, but with babies, it don't have to do with like them maybe not being able to recognize or see their mother's face, but they definitely can smell the aroma of the breast milk, and they usually confine themselves to the breast, you know, to latch on to get that milk. You get what I'm saying? It's the same process in their bodies of, you know, this feeling they get, and also not just the breast milk, but her smell and also her touch, or, you know, how she feels or whatnot. The brain absorbs each pattern of the five senses plus the sensation from inside of its body, and it learns its meaning. So sensory integration conquers the first feelings of trust and is the neural foundation for attachment. So that's pretty important for us to realize. So these notions of trust and attachment start when we're babies. So that's why it's so important to give babies a healthy environment to develop these healthy, you know, lines of trust and these healthy lines of attachment, so they don't involve themselves later on as children, older children, young adults get involved in unhealthy relationships and have these unhealthy attachment issues that you'll find some of us have. You know, you know, you're finding in men and women, right? You got men, and let's be 100. You know, the woman don't want them anymore. She leaves them. No, I'll leave it here. So there's been instances, and you know, I mean, I've had it where a man asked for the number, and because you don't want to give it to them or you decline, now they get all hostile and they want to call you a B and, you know, all this. Or even, you know, when a woman decides that she no longer wants to be in a relationship or she wants to divorce her husband, and you find out, you know, he done knocked her off, meaning he done killed her. And just happened in, you know, Florida. Like, this lady got 4 kids, and Dolly, her ex-husband, killed her, and they just found her in a storage facility. Like, that's sad. And that's when someone, you know, has definitely had some trauma in their lives, and I'll get into it when we talk about ACEs right after Marcus's point, and haven't developed healthy, you know, ways of attachment and detachment. You get what I'm saying? So, and this is why we say this show is so important. I don't want to rush into it, but there's so many things that, you know, we want to feed you so you can have a better understanding if you yourself are having certain issues. Like, I'm always one to tell you, first seek out professional help if you can, right? Especially someone that's comfortable and you can trust. But if not, if you're not ready for that yet, then at least take heed to what we're saying today, or at least take heed to the examples and the sources that is in the description box for you all to go and read yourself, especially on ACEs and things like that. And in those sources, they also have links where you can, you know, if you want to seek out help or understanding, or even take the ACEs test to understand how much trauma you yourself may have or may have, obtained from childhood. And it doesn't have anything to really do, just solely with your parents or how you were raised in the household, but also the environment you were in. So I just want to make that clear. So the three examples we just mentioned actually show us how the social world profoundly shapes the physical reality of the brain's wiring, right? So caregivers are essentially electricians, okay? So we could be the best or worst kind of electrician for a child. So we can either help wire their brain, sufficiently adequate, or we would be the ones to, be helping to wire the brain in the most inefficient or most inadequate way, which is notably detrimental, and not only to ourselves, but to the community,
Facts.
to our society. Did you want to say something to that, Brass?
Literally facts. That's it. Literally facts. I got my notepad out. I'm learning. Okay. I'm learning in real time.
So little brains require social world in order to develop typically. So social input from other humans that guide attention, talk, singing to them. These are all things we do socially to children that help cuddle them in key moments. If these needs are not met, then the consequences are devastating. And basically nobody should ever deprive babies of what they need to thrive, right? And this doesn't say anything about parents, right? This says bodies, anybody. You get what I'm saying? So wherever a child goes and whenever a child is in contact with another human being, or preferably adult, hopefully, which we know that isn't so, but hopefully by doing these shows and just continuing to be on the right side of science or whatnot, we're getting information out there to help people even reflect on themselves. Maybe you were one way before, but now understanding things and now understanding how your actions can, have an effect on young ones, then, if you weren't doing something that was adequate or right, then maybe you would change that, at least when you have children or young adults around, right? And, it wasn't just recently that we learned this stuff. We've kind of always known it, but there have been some instances that really, really gotten our attention. And this goes into our first example, actually, and a case study. And Marcus, it's your turn.
Okay, so there is situations in science that they like to monitor and look at, specific cases. They use experiments with animals, and while they can correlate to some degree, humans usually provide the best resources to understand developmental changes. One of the issues with that, though, is you shouldn't. It's just inhumane to take a child and deliberately separate them from the parent so you can monitor what happens. Horrible condition to do. We know that over years that science has abused individuals for the name of science, and we have numerous examples of that. We could talk about the Holmberg experiments that were done for dermatology. We could talk about the incidences that happen in Baltimore and other inner cities with lead paint. We could talk about Tuskegee. We could talk about some experiments that were done in some of the territories under the American government. Sometimes incidences happen that are not necessarily derived from science, but science uses them. One such situation was this Romania. The president came in charge, wanted to see an expansion of it. And in doing that, removed all the contraceptives and ended abortion. And in the book that we're going through, 7.5 Lessons, she brings it up, the highlighted section. And it says, in the 1960s, the communist government of Romania outlawed most contraception and abortion. The president, Nicolae Casuca, wanted to expand the population to become more of an economic power and therefore world power. This new law produced a huge increase in births, more children that many families could afford. As a consequence, hundreds of thousands of children were sent to live in orphanages. So, after he lost, after he was removed in 1989, the world had a view of what was actually going on in Romania. What they discovered was 170,000 children were being raised in Romania's impoverished institutions. As the children's plight became public, Fox Nelson and Zanaya realized they had a unique opportunity to study the effects of early institutionalization. The trio launched a project in 2000 and began assessing 136 children who had been living in Purchase institution from birth. So the incident is horrible. The effects of it, they used to recognize. This is the guy who did the study. Part of their conclusion came to this right here. This is one of the statements from one of the individuals from the institutions in Romania. I lived in some horrible moments. Kruder Bruder remembers. In 1989, Kruder Bruder was an educator in Sancrai in central Romania. She cared for about 25 orphans who were about 3 to 4 years old. Some were evaluated as mentally disabled, though that diagnosis was often incorrect. But because they were not stimulated, they couldn't walk, they couldn't talk. You had to feed them. Her orphanage was, was in a crumbling 19th century castle that smelled of chlorine and urine. Each morning, about 90 preschool children, some of them disabled, fought over pieces of bread smeared with cheese. They ate stew for lunch, soup in the evening. It was a horrendous, an absolutely horrendous situation. And I'll leave it as this. This is from Robert Sabowski, and it'll tell you more about it. As adults, these kids are mostly what you expect. They had low IQ, poor cognitive skills, problem with forming attachment, often bordering on autistic, anxiety, depression galore. The large institutionalization was the worst prognosis. And their brains decrease in total brain size, gray matter, white matter, frontal cortical metabolism. I can never pronounce that word. Pardon me. Connectivity between regions, sizes, individual brain regions, except for the amygdala, which was enlarged. That pretty much says it all. So I'm going to summarize exactly what happened here. What we went over is that when children are first born, they need their brains are shaped by both environmental factors, caregivers, as well as partially genetics. When these things aren't present, right, there are significant effects. It's gradient. Gradient means that to a degree, each individual child may experience these things differently, but over the population, you will find these features. When you look at certain communities here in America, this was a Romanian study. This is what they use to try to address social conditions. Lisa Barrett talks about, this is one of the situations that people need to take serious, because we already have seen the significant effects of this. So the children's brains, if you remember, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we gave y'all a source about how the frontal cortex develops, and that at each stage, certain hormones are triggered to produce certain neurological growth synapses. And then that's how the development of the prefrontal cortex and the frontal cortex happens in humans. And then there's different time frames between humans, other primates, mice, and rats. In light of that, when certain plateaus aren't reached, right, there are severe developmental problems. What is significant about the Romania study is they imitated genetic diseases such as like autism, right? But it wasn't done through genetics. It was done through harsh treatment. And if you go back to some of those sources, which I can always post in after the show in the chat, you'll be able to see them. If you go, and some of them are already part of the description. You go and listen to these children's stories where they've had to fight each other over a piece of bread. The violence, certain counselors was making children fight for certain privileges and advantages, right? You start to see these conditions, right? And then you can do a thought experiment and say, what do I see in my inner city? Why am I looking at these children who are their brains actually developing, right, to its maximum potential? Or are there social circumstances that are allowing these stages, right, these points in development to go unheard of, to allow for these people to be placed in such a negative situation? And so that's one of the examples of that's used to help verify and validate the importance of having parental parents, and not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily be parents, because they could be anyone, but they need that caregiver relationship to effectively grow fully developed brains.
Thanks.
Malcolm, you got anything?
Man, amazing again. And just briefly, having a healthy social environment is extremely important. And that starts from, I want to say, about 5 months in the womb. Things as simple as talking and reading to children can start to help to actually develop those neuronal connections. Juju mentioned about attachment. This is extremely important. And there are multiple studies to confirm what they call the attachment theory. And it's like 4 different types. I think one is like anxious avoidant. It's 3 others where they look to see how children would react or behave first when in the presence of the child. And then when the parent is taken away from the child, they look at the behavior of the child to see if they are attached, are they nonchalant, and they measure these behaviors to see if they're normal or abnormal. And they kind of make a determination on what kind of social environment that baby may be in. This also speaks to a chart or a diagram that y'all can Google or take a look at called Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy, although it's not 100%, it's a pretty good breakdown of how humans kind of move from one level to the next, starting with the basic needs. So your food, clothing, shelter, moving up to things like safety and security, and then moving up to things like loving and having that social support, moving all the way up to the last portion, which is called self-actualization. This is where you see people who start to challenge themselves, where they become college students. They go get their master's and their doctorate. So all of these are important as it relates to the social environment of children. And if I can land my plane on just one more thing, even answering the cries of babies at a specific time.
Facts.
But this to how babies were attached to the timing of answering the baby's cry. Who would know that? unless they're digging into this scientific literature. So what we're doing here is big, y'all. Real talk.
You know, as a man, you know, and you see, this is, I understand now when Juju was saying the conversation portion of the show will get where it's going to get, but as a man, it's just the point of the crying. You get told as a child so much, stop crying, man up, stop crying, man up. You better man up. Men don't cry. You just stop, you're a little boy. And then when you get older, all they tell you is, you don't show any emotion. You never cry. What's wrong with you? That would normally be something that would make you, you know, when you're dealing with a female and she's telling you, you never cry. You know, you don't show enough emotion, and you don't realize that as a man, I can't really speak for a woman. I've seen women cases, but I don't like to speak for women. As a man, I know Marcus and I know Malcolm, y'all both have been told as children, toughen up, stop crying, toughen up, do some push-ups. My father used to say that all the time. Go do some push-ups or something. Toughen up. This ain't got no time for that. And then when you get older and you start having children and you realize you're crying all the time. From the time my child was born to today, I cry still all the time at a whim. And I don't know if it's repressed, but it's just that thing of like, you got to be very careful when you're doing that. You know, you got to be very, very careful what you're telling your children, because it sticks with them. It stays with them. And then they also, most importantly, pass it down to the next generation. And then now you've created a family of men that just aren't in touch with their emotions. And then you look down the line and say the family's having a whole lot of problems and you don't know why. Well, we're still using these same things. Last point, even down to, you know, the food pyramid. You know, we didn't find out, my generation didn't find out that the food pyramid was actually upside down until we became adults. That you didn't need as many carbs. You didn't need to, you know, little things about, you know, finish all your food. Look at how much trouble that's gotten to a lot of people. You know, you don't have to finish every single bite of your food. Sit there until it's done. And now you're getting negative relationships with food. You know, it's just it's a lot of things like that. So you got to be very careful. That's why these shows are important, because in real time it's teaching you how to deal with your own children.
Facts. Well, to sum up, especially what Marcus was saying about Romania, so basically, and this is not just Romania, but this is pretty much all around the world. Anywhere that you have facilities or orphanages, detention facilities, anything like that harbor children, even what they say, like those immigration camps or whatnot, that they house refugees, anywhere that they have children and they're getting like minimal attention, we have the risk of, how did they say, creating intellectually impaired adults because of what happened to them as children. And that's what happened in Romania. But also what we're finding out is that, you know, in impoverished, you know, areas, very poor areas, but you're also having this in a lot of the neighborhoods that people like me grew up in, you know, what they want to call the ghetto, or, you know, we call them underserved, underprivileged populations. Okay. You'll find instances of this, and they know this now. And in a little bit, I'm going to get into and discussing what ACEs is. I'm going to give you the definition. I'm going to give you actually what that was about, how they came about. And then, because like I spoke of earlier, just because these things are happening to our children doesn't mean it's the end all be all, right? That there's things that we can all do as a community to help curtail, prevent, or even, you know, reverse some of these, some of the issues that are causing these quote unquote dysfunctions, right? We can do that. So I just want to give you all some more food really quick. Marcus, I'm so sorry, but can I get my prefrontal cortex picture back up, please? And the reason why I'm showing you that, because the prefrontal cortex was mentioned a lot dealing with this because that is an area that's important for many things. I might have missed exactly all the things that's important for them, but one of them is body budgeting for sure. And this is affected, that is when they're talking about, a child's brain, this is one of the areas that is less developed when, the child doesn't have adequate, given a chance to develop an adequate body budgeting system. Okay. So like I said, this is not a sit all be all. These risks can be also corrected, right? Especially if children are placed in foster homes. She spoke of, if you do have children that are institutionalized, a lot of times they're placed in foster homes and they're given a caregiver who's given everything that they need to create these healthy body budgets, create these healthy niches. You get what I'm saying? These what you call them? These shared shared attention, all these things that we can, mitigate some of this stuff. Did we talk about sensory integration at all, or did we skip over that?
No, we talked about it. You can share my screen.
No, you covered it.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, and the reason why I keep sharing this, because this is your prefrontal cortex. And Marcus spoke about it. What is that last show, Marcus? About your limbic brain. And yeah, right here. And plus, everybody knows I love visuals because that gives you a better understanding. It helps you grasp exactly what's going on and where it's going on, right? So also when children are persistently neglected, they will eventually suffer, right? And the impact may not be immediate or drastic. It could take some time. The children can be going through things and we won't see the effects until they're adults. That's a problem. I'd rather see it when they're children. Maybe we can fix it, right? Before their brains get fully developed, right? And help try to, rewire some of those things that are wired wrong. Wouldn't y'all agree?
Absolutely.
Right? But can gradually and can be gradual and subtle, these happenings, right? And it says, so basically these instances can be very gradual and subtle to the point where slowly but surely we are killing, and pruning away the important parts of the brain that needed to be wired in a healthy way. A neglected little brain may manage to wire itself alone without the social support from caregivers and wiring instructions that, usually adults provide or caregivers, right? And through this, you get a non-typical wiring. And this can be a burden on the body budget. And this is when you'll a lot of times find children who are having certain disabilities and may also look like, you ever seen a child that looks way smaller than what they're supposed to be for their age? Well, we know now that some of this comes from, this abnormal body budgeting. You know what I'm saying? Because again, the body budget works off of, efficiency and proficiency, right? So when you have this body budgeting and these metabolic. You got me doing the same thing, Marcus. You messed me up, Marcus.
Yeah, I was about to say, Mark, you done passed that over to Juju.
He did. But when you have these metabolic underpinnings, you get these sort of problems. And it's like, again, we didn't learn this, but we're starting to learn more. So like I like to say, when you know better, you do better. So now that we know, I'm like urging everyone, if you know that there's a problem around you, let's all do better. Because nothing that I've read or researched anything about what the parents just have to do. Parents do need to do some things, but it's not just their responsibility. That's what I'm trying to get to you all. Okay, so I don't want to hear that what their parents doing. No, what are you doing if you're anywhere near and around a child that has an issue? What are you doing to help? Because that parent may be struggling, right? And that gets into the point why it takes a village, and that's important. So in some instances, some children are fortunate enough to withstand the effects of extreme adversity more than others. This is pretty awesome. Every child is not going to be affected, right? Some children are going to, have the most worst upbringing, right? The most dysfunctional household, but they go off to be to Harvard. And I think this interesting, and this is something we can go in a little deeper, Marcus, to it's something I'll talk about later because I don't want to get messy, while we're live, but I was really thinking about this. So this is due to a gene variation that allows them to be less affected by the environment. So scientists usually explain this phenomena as dandelions and orchid and dandelion correlation, where they mean an orchid would be a child like that basically, if it's nurtured in the most pristine and proper environment with everything like just perfect, they can flourish. But the minute that there's a little bit of adversity, they tend to deteriorate very quickly, right? Whether you have a dandelion, it don't matter. Like they come from the rough, the rocks, they come from the gutter, right? But they're able to still flourish. And that's also, to me, an interesting concept that, in this manifestation, you still have this application of resilience, right? You can't just feed and water baby. You must meet their social needs. If these needs are not met, the likelihood of serious health problems are inevitable for them in the future. We see similar consequences with little brains that develop in extreme poverty, like I spoke of before. And this is because of inadequate nutrition, interrupted sleep, maybe due to noise. Everybody, well, I know. I lived in some very rough areas, and you just got guns popping off and just all kind of things going on at night. For me, it wasn't no biggie. I could sleep to a train wreck. But to others, and I would say I was definitely that dandelion. Don't get me wrong. I was a dandelion. I would love to be an orchid, but I ain't mad at, being a dandelion, right? But in other respects, some children, this may be very disturbing, right? And we know that when a child has inadequate sleep or nutrition, they're not going to do well when they go to school, right? Also talks about temper regulation and a lot of factors that we don't even think of. If a child ain't really got no heat in their building when it comes to wintertime, you feel me? Like their body budget is affected by this, because now the body has to do what it can to try to, keep you warm, maybe not going to hypothermia or whatnot. And constantly over and over, a child has to deal with all this type of stuff, then this causes a problem. And basically, it can alter the development in the cerebral cortex, mainly the prefrontal cortex. And that's the picture that I have posted here for you all. And anybody want to add to that before I finish up and get into ACEs real quick?
No.
Yes.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Marcus.
Okay. So if you remember the last source that I showed you, it talked about how the children in Romania had smaller amounts of white and gray matter in certain areas of the brain, but they had a much larger in another part of the brain. Well, this, if you look at this image, you see that thing that say the limbic brain?
Yes.
Part of that limbic brain that they consider part of the limbic brain is something called the amygdala, and it sits similar to this area that you see right here. If you read what it controls, you'll start to see why that was significant, that area had an increased activity in larger size. So that's flight, fight, flight, freeze, stress response. It deals with how people feel safe. And it says emotions live here. We're going to get into that. But it's one of the keystones to certain behavioral factors on how you respond to stress. And so because the amygdala, the amygdala being larger gave greater increase response to stress situations. And I'm sure we've always experienced individuals who at the drop of a dime, it's a stressful situation and they can't handle it. They have some emotional cues that are off. That's what they found in the children when they were adults from this Romania situation. And I need you to understand the time frame. We're talking about over the course of 29 years.
Right.
Right? Because he came into power in the 60s and passed the law bill around 1960, but he didn't lose power until 1989. So you're talking about at least 2 generations of children being in this situation and being processed through the situation. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. But when we look at our own communities, what do you think hearing gunshots when you're a baby in a crib does to your body budget?
Right.
Right? What do you think hearing cars driving by slamming on their horns do to your body budget? Remember that when a child is first born, it has a wide scale scape of influences, and then it narrows down. It has a ladder type of feel versus a spotlight that you later develop.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is it when you hear parents highly arguing with each other? Think about that. That now what we hearing and we seeing affects the brain and how it happens, right? Now, this is not absolute. That doesn't mean every child that's born, like Juju explained, every child that's born is going to have the same symptom. But population-wise, you see the effects of these things. And so sometimes I don't no longer live in the neighborhood I grew up in most of my life. I grew up, many people probably not familiar, it's a small state, Delaware. I grew up in West Side, West Center City section of Wilmington, Delaware. And it's a low income, impoverished neighborhood. And when I go back and I see the kids there, I admire their resilience to smile. But I wonder what the effects of that environment is having on their potential.
Right.
Right. I expect that. My family has experienced something this week involving the same subject matter. And I asked myself, if I had have explained this information, could that have changed these outcomes? Right. Or if this information was explained to me as a child, so that when I had children, I was already aware of what these certain behaviors would have an effect on my child, would things have turned out different? I can vaguely remember Hillary Clinton running for presidency and making comments about, it's better to speak to your children in full sentences. It's better to do this with your children. I'm gonna see if I can find that video. It was like a town hall where they were asking their questions. And I reflect back on it and I'm saying, man, how much better would our community be if this information had been readily available? If you look at the other side of the image, these are the sides that they found in the Romanian children that were smaller, less active, less vibrant, you could say. Empathy, insight, response flexibility, emotion regulation, body regulation, morality, intuition, attuned communication, and fear modulation. So the areas that help regulate what we would consider social behavior in these children were smaller.
Right.
And areas that affect wild responses that we see in people were larger. So that's just to give you a visual of the information. That's all.
Nice. So yeah, the prefrontal cortex is important. That's why I keep showing the image. I'm going to reiterate those functions. And the ones that was keyed in on the source material pertaining to the Romania study, and also get into what we're going to talk about, ACEs, attention and language and body budgeting. Like those things are so important, right? When we spoke about the cocktail effect and spotlighting, things like that, and how it's an open book. That's a great explanation with clarity demonstrating, exactly those areas in the brain, Marcus. Thank you for that. Those scientists are still studying the effects of poverty on brain development. We do know that it is linked to poor performance in school and fewer years of education, which leads into a cycle of happening in future generations. On average, adversity and poverty are afflictions in which little brains struggle to recover, right? And the reason why I want to tell you all this, because I want you to follow me in understanding. I'm going to get into something that we call cultural inheritance and how all this plays a role in that. And we spoke a little bit about in the beginning, right? But what's more frustrating is that all this is preventable, right? So lifting children out of poverty, and Mark is going to touch on this in a little bit, is essentially cheaper, listen to me, ladies and gentlemen, than dealing with the ramifications of poverty itself decades later. So this arrangement helps our cultural knowledge to flow efficiently from generation to generation. And this is the guess on why our brains rely on the social interaction for development, right? It's sort of like a win-lose situation almost, but not really, right? Because it could just be, dealt with wiring. We have to do with social interaction, but we do. Social interaction is, like we talked about, nurture and nature, not versus, because it's duly important, if not more important. So each brain becomes optimized for its particular environment or the one it was developed in. So caregivers curate a baby's physical and social niche, right? And a baby's brain learns that niche. And when it grows, it perpetuates that niche by passing its culture to the next generation. So that's why I said, and all this is called cultural inheritance, which is efficient and frugal, right? Evolution does not provide all of our wiring instructions in our genes, but offloads some of this responsibility to the environment around us, including other humans in the world that we live in. So by this, we unknowingly wire our culture into our offsprings soon after birth, for better or for worse. I hope y'all caught that. So
Yep.
little things.
Yep,
Did y'all catch that?
I caught it. I caught that.
Okay.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm glad you paused right there too, because that's important.
It's important, and I might have to read it again because this is a whole nother show, but we can get into when we talk about things about generational curses, right? And what Marcus spoke about earlier about post-traumatic slave disorder, right? Like all those tie into that. Even when we're talking about, this kind of cultural norm, especially in the Black community, about whipping our children, which I am adamantly against. I do not recommend, I'm also not the one to say, don't spank your child, because I also know that different children are stimulated and they receive instruction in different ways. And I do understand corporal punishment, but I also feel like we don't do it nowhere near correctly. Like that's something you definitely need to be trained on. But from my understanding, from what I know, most psychologists, psychiatrists, or whatnot, professionals adamantly are against it because of that cultural inheritance, right? Because of that which happened to especially African Americans here in this country when it comes to, being enslaved and whipping or whatnot. If y'all don't understand that, I don't know what I can say to make you, but a lot of times we're past the cultural inheritance can be good or bad, right? So for me, that's actually a bad or negative thing. I myself, and I don't mean to make it personal, but anybody can step in. I can count how many times on two hands I was beat as a child, and I can eliminate that to one hand. You feel me? And that's not meaning I was a great child. Like I had my issues, but I also was very cunning and I didn't get caught for a lot of stuff. I ain't gonna lie. Feel me? But beating me to smithereens wasn't the first option that my mom or my grandmother, whoever had a hand in raising me, went to. Thank God, because boy, I'm already a mess, just on my own. Maybe because of the environment, but I definitely ain't need that added sauce onto the ribs, right? I ain't need that extra sauce. I'm sauced up enough. So little brains wire themselves to the world. Did anybody want to add anything to what I was saying as far as the cultural inheritance? before I get into ACEs and show this small video? I'm about to wrap it up here.
No, I want to get into this ACEs. I'm just saying, as far as me, Malcolm, you got anything?
No, I was a student in that regard. The whole show, actually, but especially there, I'm just.
Yeah, right. But that was interesting because I didn't realize that they were going to tie it into, like this thing that we were definitely passing along generation to generation, not just our children, but, and then it becomes this cultural kind of manifestation. That's powerful, y'all. Yeah, we're going to have a whole show on that. Trust me, because that's powerful than y'all can imagine. So little brains wire themselves to the world, and it is up to us to create that world, including a social world rich with wiring instructions to grow those brains healthy and whole. Didn't say parents. It said us, the world, right? I'm just going to keep reiterating that. Yeah, because I used to, because I'm an advocate for children, I don't have any of my own. It breaks my heart every time I try it. Whole nother story. But I will oftentimes give suggestions and whatnot to friends or people that I knew. And it's funny because sometimes I would get the pushback, when they got in their feelings, well, you don't have any children of your own. You don't know. That's the worst thing you could say to me, because then I snap, right? And I snap because the same people that was telling me this is the same people that I helped raise their children when they was out in the streets doing whatever they wanted to, right? Instead of their money going to their children, it went to other things like drugs. So it was funny to me that they would try to throw that in my face while I'm working hard to make a buck so I can pay for your daughter to go to her junior prom, right? So I can pay for your daughter to go get makeup and get her dressed for whatever activity. That was mean, but I also, because it didn't say parents when it said a village, saw children that were in need. And because I had it, I did what I could for them to make sure that they had a better life, right? And I'm glad to say that I had a hand in that, along with their grandmother and everybody else, but definitely being a key component in their lives at a certain period of time. Unlike their mother and their fathers that I knew, it was a group of 4, all of them graduated from high school. So that was a crucial thing for me. You get what I'm saying? That I was able to have a hand in that in spite of. So don't let nobody tell any of you who are out there that don't have children, and that you're doing something positive and worthwhile for them, and that that you are giving instruction that is scientifically sound and based on some real stuff. Don't let them tell you because you don't know no better because you ain't got none of your own. Because there's a lot of women with children who ain't taking care of them. If that was the case, we wouldn't have any type of orphanages or adoption agencies, abortion going on, none of that. So yeah, I don't want to hear that. I was a little triggered, but I just have to give that story of people who may have been put in that situation feel triggered. So stemming off of what Marcus had to say about Romania and their orphanages and this situation that happened in the 60s, we also have like this our own encompassing situation that is taking place currently. So I want to talk to you about ACEs. First off, and this is all very personal, being an advocate for children, I had the opportunity maybe a couple years ago to actually get certified in ACEs. So when I started to tell you about some of the stuff that's going on, then you'll understand why. And then when Marcus gets into, and I'm gonna make it as quick as possible, gets into the state of rationale of the country and explain that process, then you'll understand this a little more. But to give it to you, being a child's advocate, working in a nonprofit organization, I wasn't necessarily a professional working with children at the time, but because certain key members of the community, and not only were they key members of the community, but they also had positions working for like the Department of Health or whatnot, knew and saw what I did, they would oftentimes invite me to workshops that were for professionals to be certified in certain things. And this lady that I knew very well, she was a boss lady, another Black woman. I love that. And, she saw what I was doing and she appreciated it. So whenever there was an opportunity to have training and anything that had to deal with children, she always gave me the heads up and let me come in. So one of the last trainings that I had before I had to take hiatus from working for the community for obvious health reasons, was with ACEs, right? So this was, my city of Daytona Beach, Florida, incorporating this for any professional who work with children, whether you work with foster kids or you work at the detention center or you are a foster parent or you were a teacher. They had a workshop to teach us about ACEs, to train us on it, to train us how to detect if a child possibly had some type of childhood trauma, and also to how not to, how should I say, increase that or to exaggerate their circumstances, but to help, right? Because a lot of times we can exaggerate or expound or make worse a negative situation and not know it. So, you know, by just the things we say that we don't realize that are not adequate to say to a child who may be experiencing some type of trauma. So, yeah, and I got that certificate. It was pretty awesome. So, you know, basically I was trained if any child ran away from home, you know what I'm saying? I was a safe place to come to, or I was someone they could talk to or be, you know, the first step in them finding help, because then I was also trained on how to seek out other lines of help that could adequately meet their needs if they were in any type of situation. Just to let you know. And I will also advocate for any one of you who are interested, just check with your your local health department or any agency dealing with children and see if there are any, you know, courses open for you to take and to be trained to have a better understanding. So to ACEs, I'm going to give you a few things. And remember, all the links for this show are in the description box. And I'm going to give you a few quick details about it. And then I'm going to play a video for you and we can have a floor. So ACEs is capital A, capital C, capital E, is adverse childhood experiences, which are potentially tragic events that occurred within the childhood between the ages of 1 and 17 years old. The foundation of how ACEs even came about was a joint study actually between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in the mid-1990s. And basically what they did, Kaiser Permanente had these group of patients or whatnot who were insured under them, and they did this survey, right? And the gist of the survey was to basically see how childhood trauma affected their health. So the initial study focused on how childhood experiences or events may negatively affect adult health, and it was 17,000 patients who were surveyed. And they were asked about their experiences of childhood, like maltreatment, family dysfunction, and their current status of health and behavior, right? So the study showed that there was a direct correlation between childhood trauma and adult onset of chronic diseases, also incarceration and employment challenges. The higher number of ACEs is what they call it, or an ACE score, the greater the incident of negative outcomes. That's deep. So this research was so profound that other people started to notice the trend and started to doing their own studies. And I will tell you one in particular. Her name is, so I've been talking about ACEs for some years. And one particular lady, her name is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. I put her links in our description box. Go watch her TED Talk. I actually saw her years before I ever took the ACEs training and learned about ACEs. And because of the knowledge that I gained by researching to myself, I will always try to remember and implement some of the things I learned then before I ever took the training class, because I could see myself in that study and I did not want that to keep happening, right? And I could also see where things were done to lessen the outcome of, to lessen the negative outcome from my traumatic experiences. So, you know, I was always like, well, if I can make it, anybody can, right? I mean, raised in the hood, my mom was an ex-felon, raised in a dope game, you know, on and on and on. It was some things, but I was always able to, you know, circumvent that. You know, I was always an honor student. I was always popular. I was like the unpopular, popular girl. Students and teachers loved me. You feel me? I had some great experiences in spite of my circumstances, but that's because not only did my family, you know, do things to mitigate those negative outcomes, but, you know, being actively engaged and involved in school helped with that. You get what I'm saying? So that's why I'm always telling people with children, don't let your children sit around the house. Get them in something. This research also became really big that Philadelphia did an ACEs project. So the difference with them, so I would tell you now, it doesn't say it in the source material, but I already know this for a fact, and it's in some other source material. I just couldn't find it readily. But the first test was really done with a more like affluent audience, okay? And maybe it was a little more plain and vanilla than we would like to think. So Dr. Nadine Burke, she ended up becoming the Surgeon General in California. But when she was practicing, because she was the first one I heard about it, she talked about it in her practice. Like she kept getting sent these children, and like, because she worked in like, you know, dilapidated, underserved population, getting children that were diagnosed with ADD, but she couldn't really find why, because it wasn't really ADD. It was them experiencing traumatic effects in their childhood that was having an effect on their health. And so when she realized this, she sought out some more information, then she came across this. So she started applying ACEs and, you know, making them do the survey to her patients to really pinpoint what the problem is, and then find resources to help parents and the children with the problem to mitigate the negative outcomes. Philadelphia got hold of this and decided to do their own study, but instead they focused on the inner city, right?
Right.
This was wild. So they did ACEs among inner city youth, and the implications of intergenerational trauma is what it showed. They also added some stuff. So not just the normal stuff, but they also added like instances of bullying, community violence, neighborhood safety, racism, and also those who lived in foster care. So the first study showed you a result of 68.9% of people scoring at least one on the ACEs test, where this study showed 83.2% people scoring at least one on the test, which is a dramatic jump. So that goes to show you that indeed poverty, or at least underserved, underprivileged, dilapidated environments definitely have an effect on our children. So with that said, I'm going to play a little video for you. Before I do that, any of you like to say a quick word?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a quick quote from Nadine Burks Harris. She did a TED Talk, and that was my introduction to ACEs. She said, children are compelled to give meaning to what is happening to them. When there's no clear explanation, and this is key, they make one up.
Yep.
The intersection of trauma and the developmentally appropriate egocentrism of childhood often leads a little kid to think, I made it happen. And I think that that's very important, you know, as we're talking about these conversations in regards to children. And I can't stress this enough. You have to create fertile ground for your children. You create the society that they see. It's really up to you. You can take them to the places that they go. You see these videos of children that can just, you know, recite rap lyrics over like it's the Constitution and things like that. Like it can literally just say rap lyrics word for word for word for word. And what it is they're losing the other part. So they're using that part to memorize nonsense, and they're losing the other things that help them. So I really appreciate this conversation.
Uh-oh, my bad, Bobby. Bobby Banger in the building.
I know I've been fighting all day.
Man.
Egypt is a black land. No, I'm playing.
God.
What's up, Meg Rob, Brass, and Marcus? What time y'all started, man? Why y'all? Come on, man. Dang. What y'all started, 7 or 8?
Like 7:30.
About 7:30.
I apologize. I was so enraged. I just forgot all about the show, ran over top of the show. I did all the wrong things.
We got more than one tank.
Killing. Nah, but I can't ride over a tank. It can't be personal. Like I gotta take the whole group in consideration. We can't. That's out of order for me to just run all the stops. I ran over everybody. Didn't care. Was just thinking about myself today, and I apologize to the group for that.
You okay?
I never want to split the people up like that. Right, because I'm in full support right, of the team that helped make me great. And I'll never want my shine to outshine the group like that. That was out of order.
You
So
know
I'm
you
not gonna
shine bright like a diamond.
no, but that not when you shine over the people that help you do what you do. Then that's wrong. That's like that's something you would never do. You know what I'm saying? Like if I get money, everybody's supposed to get money. That's how it really supposed to work. Because at the end of the day, if your team not shining, yo, then ain't nobody shining. So I apologize, man. This is an excellent show. And then I'm so wild that I don't even say, look, the show is live. Everybody, let's go. I ain't even do that. Chief X was in the chat, wouldn't let him up.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying?
God.
He all trying to get in. I'm like, oh, nigga, you ain't getting it. All that was in my head. Instead of saying, hey, man, I overran my time. Let's come over to the Pseudo Killers and do our thing. So I apologize for that.
Well, we know that that guy you was just talking about that I won't ever mention, I'm sure he got a lot of scores on his aces.
Oh yeah, I know his aces.
that
Lit.
attachment
His aces
issue.
scores were lit. His scores were so lit, he tried to drink moringa to fix it. This man,
We gotta cut it out.
was shooting moringa just to
Oh,
try to
boy.
get them scores
I'm
down.
done. Oh God. So we already know his ace score is lit, but Bob, you got anything you want to say? I'm gonna play this short video and then
No,
we'll
I'm just wanting you to know, man, that I'm enjoying the show, man. I'm here, I'm listening, I'm right here, yo. With the team, yo.
Thank you for supporting.
I'm in it supporting, man. I gotta support this owl thing, man.
Right?
Man,
exactly.
We can't do it. If we ain't working together, yo, you know what I mean? If we ain't got Marcus, right? If we ain't got Mac Rob, you know what I'm saying?
Got
If
Mac in the building.
Brass, the Army, the Jujus, the Miss Tiff, and everybody, man, the Sosas, the Kents,
right?
Francis, and everybody, man. It ain't there. So we here, man. We're gonna calm down. Where's Cedric at? He's running around mad. Yeah.
Cedric over here doing this.
Yeah, but he already know in the community skeptics, man. We ain't muting nobody out, man. Fight your war.
Oh boy.
Right now, you can fight your war. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Fight your war, yo. I ain't stopping you. Right? Ain't nobody stopping you. So yeah.
Hey, sometimes people have been on the front line just a little bit too long. you need to bring him in. What they call that in the military?
Rehydrate.
A furlough or something.
Furlough. No. They need to bring me and Cedric off the front line.
Just give them back. Go outside. Take a leave.
Me and Cedric is taking a leave. Cedric, me and you are taking a leave from the conversation. Then we're going back to battlefield. Go ahead, sis. What you can ready play tonight? It ain't gonna kill a channel, is it? Whatever you think you plan, I hope you do it right.
I hope I do it too.
You don't know? You supposed to know before you do it. You supposed to be absolutely sure it ain't gonna strike us out the game. Do you know?
I don't know yet, but we're gonna see.
What you mean?
No, it's by the CDC.
I don't agree with this now.
It's the what? It's from the where? Man, the BBC be the main people's gonna kill you. The BBC. Hey, look.
No, I have a disclaimer though.
That disclaimer don't mean nothing. Man, they're shooters. Let me see.
Yeah,
That's
but they want people to use this.
What? Here we go. Go ahead.
If it even comes up,
what is that? The CDC?
We're gonna try it.
You're gonna try it. You say we're gonna
see. Is this
see.
still looping for you all?
Yep, they might not want you to play it.
It might not. Look, it might not let me do it.
Yeah, it might say, hold on. Where Mark?
But we could talk about the article though. They got an article also.
Where Mark is at? He on there?
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. Their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that knew so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need, and just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community-supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood and even continue in future generations. But by people and groups taking action, ACEs can be prevented. In fact, there are 5 known strategies that help stop ACEs before they even start. You can implement them in your own community, just like we did. How? By strengthening economic support for families, by changing social norms to support parents in positive parenting, by providing quality care and education early in life, by enhancing parenting skills to promote healthy child development, and by intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. I had healthy relationships with my family and friends. I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
We made it.
Very nice.
Yeah, I had a possibility it wouldn't get strike for this one thing is because taking this class, I know that they make the materials available so people can have, these training courses, or whatnot, and they allow them for groups discussions. I kind of knew that, so I wasn't too worried though. Anybody have anything that they want to add or?
Yeah, that's very important. ACEs and understanding how it affects our children, because there's just so many statistics, like we saw, that our children basically, if you haven't had that strong bond around 12 to 13 years old, we see in tuning and pruning that other people's voices tend to take on more importance than yours if you haven't done the work. And even while we were watching that, I just saw another stat from MedHealth that said 75% of the time that we're going to spend with our children happens before the age of 12. So just think about that. 75% of the time that you're going to spend with your child will take place before the age of 12. So everything from 12 to the time you pass or they do is the other 25%. So that time is so important before they get into their phones, before the boys get into girls and the girls get into boys. You know, that child is a youth when that soil is fertile is important.
Marcus?
No, it's what we've been discussing, this whole show, how neuroplasticity, pruning and tuning, how the brain develops these key points, and that in these adverse situations, it has dire consequences. And I think that science as a whole has been making this compelling argument that we need to really take a step back and reevaluate how we have our current society structure, because we're not getting good returns on our investments. Our children are suffering. We're falling further and further behind because we have antiquated ideas on how children's develop. And we're going to get into that shortly.
Right. I like the part about the social norms, right? Changing those social norms. We just talked about that, right? Because I don't listen. Whipping has more adverse effects than helpful ones. I'm gonna tell you now. Okay. I watch my sister. She used to get whipped and used to laugh at it. It was badder and badder every time. So.
Oh man.
She was one of them type, okay? For me, I'd rather you whip me than talk me to death, which is funny because
I'm a runner from whippings. I run. I'm hitting it.
See, that's the thing.
Hitting the gas. Running.
You know, if you run close to them, then the end of it can't really hit you and it hurt. That's why you stick close to your mama. You don't run away because you catch the tail end of it, and that's when it hurts.
I was pretty fast, so they couldn't catch us. You mean older uncles and them, they trying to beat us. Yo, we running, and I'm shaking you up. We done. You ain't catching me, and it was over with. We never.
Oh
uncles
God,
and them, we running. We running. We not standing around taking no licks. Never was doing that.
My mother's fighting style was MMA, WWE. She did whatever she had to do. And I'm going to tell you something. She treated us just like the police. If you make me run, if you make me chase you, this is going to be 10 times worse.
Yeah, but I was running every time.
Oh, my God.
Catching 2-3 licks. I'm running. Yeah, I'm a runner. I admit it. Aunt try to get me. We breaking out the house. We gone. You know, you at cookouts, y'all start acting up. We gone. Yeah, we ain't sticking around. Take the licks. Yeah, I'm a runner.
My mom was the look. All she had to do is look at me. I know what's going down later.
Oh yeah,
I know what's going down later. Sosa just said, yeah, they grabbed him in advance because they knew what it was.
Running. Yeah, I'm blocking. I'm doing everything.
Oh, his mama used to put him. She used to put him in that claw hole with the legs. You cross over and you claw him before you whip him. That's what Sosa got.
Yeah, we ducking, we blocking, we grabbing belts out of hands. We doing all that. We not just no. We getting the tucks with the belt. Yeah, we doing all that. Yeah, we definitely doing all that. We definitely I don't know. What would y'all call that? What part of the brain is that? Fight or flight?
Yeah, but that's isn't that in the prefrontal cortex, Marcus? Didn't we talked about that earlier?
Malcolm.
Amygdala.
Oh, that
amygdala abdominica. Yeah, I'm grabbing belts. I'm not.
Say it again, Bobby, in the Baltimorean accent. The what?
Amygdala abdominica. When I'm grabbing the switch, you know your mother make you go get the switch, right? I'm already putting cracks in the switch.
Man,
you get about 3 hits and it's falling apart. I'm doing all above now.
I love it. At least you have some strategy with it.
What? I'm not just staying there getting beat.
I know, right?
Tripping.
Nah, I was a lucky one.
9 years old, yo.
I didn't old.
9 and 8 is over with, dog. Like my speed is faster than any adult at that age. Trust me, yo. And my stop ability, stopping on a dime as you run by me, duck under your leg. I'm not getting needles neither. I'm ducking and dodging. Everybody in the hospital shaking and baking. They can't even catch me to give me a needle. All above. Yeah, that was me. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You was so they was training you for them sports, huh?
Man, listen, no, rarity get a beating, yo. Rarity. Yeah, like, yeah. I stayed out of trouble though. But I don't know what part of the brain it is, but I believe it to be the fight or flight.
The fight or flight.
I was definitely taking flight.
Oh my goodness.
Yours was flight or flight.
Oh,
you was out. Flight or flight. That's the only two choices.
What? Man, running around the table. They couldn't even catch us running around the table. They get tired first. The adults get tired first. We run around the table, dog. What? You ever ran around the table with your uncle trying to catch you with a belt?
Lord. Yeah, funny. I was never that type of child. I didn't get whippings at all. So lucky. I don't be know. I can't even be. I can't relate. I was a good child. Mm-hmm. Bad juju came when I got older. But Marcus, let's talk about this this state of rationale though, because we talked about an important point earlier when we discussed how it's actually cheaper to eliminate child poverty and these things that can have, that play into us having a negative outcome and, these negative effects on our body budget and as children, then to actually deal with the effects of poverty, and the things that happen as these children become adults. So did you want to talk about the nation of rationalia really quick or whatnot? Marcus.
Absolutely. I wanted to let me just show this right quick.
Sure.
About some statistics that are troubling to me. Can you see it, Juju?
Yes, sir. I will share it shortly. Just a moment. It should be sharing in just a moment for you. There we go.
So this is just to give you an idea of how many children in the United States are in foster care. And you can see it's quite it's a lot. It's a lot. And our hope, at least my hope, is that these numbers decrease. One of my main concerns is percentage-wise, African Americans have way too many children in foster care systems. What we can do about it, I'm not sure. I'm not really qualified to really make that judgment. I just know that it's an issue that has to be addressed. Considering what we talked about today, and the effects this has, this is a serious issue in our community. Serious issue.
What?
I personally have been supporting a foster home that's local to where I live. And my son is with some of the children there trying to put this information into practice. It's concerning. It really is concerning. If you was to look at things such as drug usage, suicide, look at these social effects, and look at those who were in foster care. The numbers is outrageous. Look at the children in prisons, incarcerated, children living on the street. Look how many of them are coming from foster homes, where you would think that they would be in loving, caring homes, but in some cases, the foster home is actually worse than the home they was taken away from with the abuse. Last year at that same home I'm talking about, a young man took his life. Yeah, committed suicide. Devastating. These are serious. I know we're accustomed to not really going depth into some of the social problems that these subjects that we've been talking about are really trying to drive home. But for me, this is so impactful to not just your everyday living, but even in neighborhoods. You understand? There's a saying they used to say, it takes a village to raise a child. I think that when you understand this neuroplasticity, when you understand ACEs, you understand how true that statement is. That while your home may be structured and beautiful, if your neighbor home is chaotic and you don't at least take some care for that, the effects on your child and the neighborhood and other children can be dramatic. So
that's an interesting stat right there. So wait a minute. So y'all do realize that the laws and the way the communities are set up across the board now, that all that it take a village to raise people ain't gonna work. You know, you literally getting into fights if you tell somebody that your child is out there selling drugs. They cussing you out, you ready to fight. If you see a group of individuals, you tell them, look, man, y'all need to relax. Parents are coming into the situation saying, don't say nothing to my kids and all that. So the situation is different now, right? The village to raise a kid, you ain't doing that. You going to jail if you grab somebody else's kid. You might get shot by one of them kids, 13 and 14-year-old. Whole dynamics is different. And those stats right there are very, very telling. And it's interesting. You say, what can we do? For birth control is also an effective method. Okay. And people fight against that, right? They don't want to give people a choice, right? First, education is first of all. You got to raise the young boys, right? In reality, like, come on, dude, you shouldn't be having a whole lot of sexual partners like that. You tell the young girls that, but you don't tell the boys that. It's okay if your son got 4, 5, 6 girlfriends and sleeping with them, right? But your daughter's a whore if she's doing it. That's wild, right? It takes two to make the thing go right. So education got to be right. Okay, birth control got to be in place, right? The whole thing got to be reformed. Those numbers are wild right there. Wow.
Yeah.
Out of order. And you can't blame white people for it.
To speak to that graph even worse, and I didn't see it. I actually pulled it up here. The numbers behind that graph are even more terrifying. Black children represent 14%. In 2021, they represented 14% of the total child population, but 22% of the kids in foster care. By comparison, white kids represent 49% of the nation's child population, but only 43%. So we're actually, it's actually worse than just looking at the numbers. It's terrible because we're actually overrepresented in the foster care system. And for anybody who's been in foster care, I know I have a lot of friends that they went to Job Corps, they quote unquote went down south or whatever you want to call it when their parents got locked up. It's just not a place to be. It is very hard to believe that the world is a beautiful place when you're in foster care. You want anything, Malcolm? Or you good?
Nah, man, I like the point that y'all touched on, man. And to a degree, I kind of touched on the elephant in the room. You know what I'm saying? Just touching on the education related to mature sexual practices, teaching the young equally how to be sexually responsible, as opposed to teaching our young males to brag and boast about how many women they've had. Incorporating the science of sexual protection and birth control. These things help. Raising kids, it's expensive if you look at current data. I think current data supports or shows that raising a kid from birth to 18 is up to $250,000 for the average parent on average.
That's a correct number.
African American families ain't doing it like that. Not in totality, but that's a pretty hefty number if you think about having 5 kids. Now you got to multiply that times 5, and that's the position I'm in. Speaking of kids.
Man, when you put it like that, it's staggering.
Yeah, it's definitely it has to be a cultural shift. Period. But like I said, the law is kind of guard against, like you can't even, hit your kids, I dare you. Lock your kids and get you locked up. So that's not on the table. Right? Me personally, right, I never beat my kids. That doesn't actually, I don't think that actually works. I think punishment, make them do extra stuff, right? That works, but I never beat my kids. Right? They can't say it. Might have tapped their hand once or twice when they was younger. But I don't grab the belts. I don't do all that. Yeah, and I think, I don't do all that. Yeah, you can ask my kids, I don't do that. It's not part of discipline measures in my household. Yeah, for the last 22 years. Yeah, so I wonder why we even thought they need to do that. Then, you know what I'm saying? Like, that don't work, beating the kid. That never didn't work for me. Get it over with, because I'm running.
All those stories of people now where they talk about how their parents used to beat them and how their parents used to just whoop them and, oh man, you used to beat me and all this, that, and the other. And I talk to my son every day. He's 14, he's about to be 15, and I think in a week or so. And one of the things that I love about this generation and this time, I could throw away some of it, but the fact that they're starting to recognize mental health a lot more important in children. Not just saying this kid's just crazy or this kid's just bad, recognizing the things that's happened to this child to put him in that position, and not just, you can't just beat it out of them. You got to be very careful. So, I appreciate these conversations.
So we heard of, the conversation we've been having on the free will, right? So, so are we at, like the way you punish a person and all that? Could that be part of it?
Oh, yeah. Lord.
Yes, yes. If you look at the conversation we're having, it's more about change the circumstances around your child when they're young, and you can build, and that's more effective to less prisons than trying to rehabilitate whole adults. We already said at 12 years old, they're listening to other voices more important than yours. At 25, your neuroplasticity drops by about 75 to 80%. So now, it's more important to create fertile ground and fertile soil for the children, change the society earlier, and the society automatically, just because we don't have free will, that it will be in a much better place when these kids get older.
And you know what? Go ahead, Juju. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say to your question to that, Bobby, not that you was asking it, but the reason why we just think that beating is the only way, well, it's a part that we talked about when it comes to cultural integration. You feel me? It's like we saw our parents do it. They saw their parents do it. Their parents, people, you know what I'm saying? So and that was one part of the ACEs, right? One part that says how we prevent this, to change cultural norms. That's a cultural norm, but it's not really having a positive benefit for the most part. So that's when we gotta toss those things and do something different, right? Do something more creative, right? That'd be more advantageous and beneficial to our children. Marcus?
That's why I ran. I already knew I was ahead of the curve.
You sticking with this brother.
What? I was ahead of the curve. Oh, no, don't abuse me. No,
yeah, your aunt them thought you was at a different level of running.
Now, think about that. Focused. Your aunt them thought they could beat you. Let me tell you, everybody thought they could beat you. Your aunt, your older cousins that you always thought was your aunts, but they really was your damn cousins. They was your mother and them cousins.
Second cousins.
Your second cousins thought they was your aunt. You had to call them aunt. Right. They thought they could beat you. Definitely running, nigga. Might swing on you. Your grandmother and them thought they could get you, right? Your older brothers and older sisters thought they could get you. You had to run to survive.
Yeah.
Everybody had a license to beat you. Shout out to Chill, man. Man, what's up with Cleveland in the house, man? Cleveland did their thing together today against the Pittsburgh Steelers, man.
Oh, lot.
Oh, yeah, they got them out the game.
You know, it's funny with this integration of football in the shows. I love it, though. I ain't even hate that.
What you talking about? We just
go Dolphins. Them Dolphins got them Raiders.
Did they book the score 2013?
I don't know.
You don't even know the score.
I know. Somebody told me. Yeah.
What you gonna say, Mark?
Florida State is undefeated, so I'm happy. Might not happen no more, considering, but you know, we good. But anywho, sorry, Marcus.
So that really leads us into what has been in the conversation with science over the last maybe 20, 25 years. And what they've been trying to express is that policies should actually be based off of the most current scientific information. And the reason why that is because we now can see what happens in childhood development. And as Lisa Barrett has made this compelling argument, and she will touch on it again, believe me, when you get further along in the book, it will definitely be rehatched, this conversation, that it is cheaper to address poverty than it is to deal with the consequences of allowing children to grow up in poverty. Juju, share my screen right quick. So if you read this little section right here, this is from her book. It says, we see similar consequences when little brains develop in poverty. Research shows that early and long exposure in poverty is bad for developing brain. Inadequate nutrient, interrupted sleep due to street noise, poor temperature regulation due to lack of heat or ventilation, and other circumstances of poverty may alter the development of the front of the cerebral cortex, namely the prefrontal cortex. So we've showed you images of the prefrontal cortex. We explained what that is about regulation, what we consider to be social behavior. A few years ago, there was a big hiccup dealing with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Is that his name, or did I reverse it again?
You got it right.
Right.
Yeah, because I get that man name backwards all the time.
You got it.
And he put out a tweet about a make-believe country called Rationale. And what he was arguing, or what he was trying to emphasize, is that that policies should be based on the most current information. Lisa Barrett is saying, let's address poverty now, so that if you address poverty now, we can minimize the effects of it in adulthood. Robert Sapolsky talking about we don't have free will. What does he say? Let's address these issues first, so that we can prevent the probabilities of these negative outcomes later on in life. Right? Sam Harris, you can just go through them all. They're all making the same plea. What happens is we get, I was a victim to it. I told you earlier about Ivanka Trump trying to pass that FMLA, Family Leave Act, and how I was reluctant to even give it a hear because of my personal feelings towards Donald Trump and politics and other social problems I have with his behavior. But the science is clear that giving parents that room, that safety, that security, and being able to still make money or survive while being able to focus on those early developmental periods of a child can have such beautiful benefits. So when he put out this Rationale conversation, when he went to talk about it, he got a lot of pushback. And having that pushback, it was a lot of tweets. It was a lot of anger directed to him. You can catch him on Joe Rogan show talking about, as well as his book Starry Messenger, in which he goes in there. Can you share my screen right quick, Juju? So this is after having that conversation and having all these things going on with his pushback, he decided to lay out what he means by that. And what he was saying was, what if the Constitution had an amendment in it, or had a statement in it that policies would be based on the most relevant information? And then he went on and started listing what that nation would look like. And then in this section right here, you can read what he says about what we're talking about. In Rationalia, that's the name of his make-believe country, research in psychology and neuroscience would establish what level of risk we are willing to take and how much freedom we might need to forfeit in exchange for comfort, health, wealth, and security. What he's trying to explain is that, and this has been like I said, an argument, a discussion in the science community. What they're trying to say is, listen, we may not know all the mechanisms that go into neuroplasticity. We may not know all the mechanisms that go into the networks of your brain. We may not know all of the mechanisms that led to the evolution of the brain. But what we do know right now is that our policies and structures do not work for what we now understand about human beings. It just isn't working. It's based on flawed reasoning and philosophy that does not actually occur according to what the science says. And so, yes, we talk about these long strands of, should we keep the child tax credit being passed out to parents ahead of time? The results are in. Like, it's no need to continue to go down that road. The results are in. We raised the children out of poverty. They were able to get enough nutrient. We just read what you said, what happens when children don't have that, right? The prefrontal cortex, that frontal cortex that stops a kid from busting you in the back of your head and robbing you, that rationale that's supposed to help prevent kids from doing that, fully develops. Without it, then you have chaos. It's a very touchy situation, but we're trying to get the best return on our investment. I would rather pay a little more in taxes to ensure that the kids in my neighborhood had adequate food, shelter, clothing that they need so that they can help uplift the whole neighborhood. That's just my personal feeling on it. But I'm coming from the point of that science has been saying this for quite some time. The rationale was back in 2016. Mac Rob has had Malcolm experience about trying to make sure that we keep everything on the most relevant information. Cedric also has had said experience. You can hear him talk about his experiences during COVID and trying to use the most relevant information to prevent added stress, added deaths, right? In my own experience working with children in the neighborhoods that I work with, especially during the agriculture program, a lot of these kids' parents are alcoholics or they have other conditions, and the only place of safety they have is coming to the garden and picking fresh fruit and talking to the volunteers that work down there. I mean, this is a serious situation. We went through ACEs. You see the adverse childhood experiences and what it does. Robert Sapolsky talks about why zebras don't get ulcers, stress, and how it affects your body. So I like Mac Rob to just probably share some of his experience in that thing, and then we can just see where we go from there.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Science should guide the policies. The policies should not guide the science. And you're right, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's funny that he mentioned it prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it actually proved his point. Uh, we should be utilizing the most current and available data to help us move forward in society. And to a degree, we do see it, although it's kind of the turtle's pace. Again, we have, for example, we have vaccines for kids going into schools. Even things like putting up speed limits and seat belts and things of that nature. It comes pretty slowly, and with changing government, obviously, a little bit down the line. But I support that. We saw in COVID-19 here in my city that we had the mask mandate, and this may have been across the nation, but in my city particularly, we did have the mask mandate on and off the job. There were hospitals requiring personnel to have vaccines in order to work, because the thought was, hey, first off, we need to protect people not only from other people, but also from themselves. And so our governing bodies made certain decisions, and of course, there was these competing decisions about, okay, is it better to put these restrictions up that will save individuals, and this here now I'm going on a national scale. Is it better to save these 50, 60, 70, 80, 90-year-olds? Does that outweigh the benefit of us shutting down schools for these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know what I mean? These children and shutting down businesses. Do we lose more on the back end than we gain on the front end? So you had those kind of conversations going on in these political circles as to how we should move forward with policy and governing the rest of society. So I absolutely saw similar things in my city.
I want to speak to that point. One of the things I live in Jersey now, but one of the things in Dayton, Ohio, they're actually seeing a phenomenon called COVID kids. These are kids that are struggling. During the COVID, they were sophomores, juniors, and seniors going into college, and the literal rates of them leaving, have really struggling in that social aspect of school because they literally were in the house for 3 years. They don't things like the prom should not be taken away. Now I know we have to weigh that against the vaccines. I completely agree with what they did, but there is a price to pay that we're not going to see, not just in sickness, but just in kids who, they're being told, your house is now school. There needs to be a separation of things like that. For 3 years, the kids woke up, got out of bed, and went to school, but never left the house. So they're gonna, I think the effects of that time, are gonna be seen over the decades.
I agree. I think that what we're going over now can definitely help with that, right? Because we understand these timelines that we're dealing with, right? And then knowing these timelines, what can we set in place that can address the outcomes from being shut down during COVID, right? I remember I was listening to Dr. Joy, the girl Joy, I can never pronounce her last name again. And she was talking about the effects of watching the Twin Towers fall, right? That people in all over the world, felt anxiety, right? It's one of those things that makes us uniquely human. It's part of the evolutionary process. And while we use these mechanisms differently, there are consequences to it, right? So when we first started, we talked about how animals come out, their brains are way more developed than ours. Because our brains take so long to have these developmental processes, it makes it more susceptible to damage to negative outcomes, right? So a horse coming out with a deformity or whatever, would be isolated quickly. But in our brain is still developing. You may not see these effects until 15, 16, 22, which is why the Romania situation is so important in studying these effects, because you have 2 generations over 29 years. You can see the developmental problems that come on when they turn 30 and they turn 35. That's not the only situation they can see it in, but that's one of the main ones. And when you hear, you get more context when you hear things like, children in single mother households, the effects of what that has on the criminal justice system, on education. You can see why, because you have our brains need so much focused attention at a period of time. It's difficult for one person to do. It just is. It's just difficult. Even though, men don't do as much, they're now finding out, no, that has an effect. Having a male there to assist in those developmental stages makes a difference. Ak is always talking about one situation where the hormones, pheromones from males can
I correct that? I gotta correct that, Marcus.
Sure,
it's not just single mother households anymore. It's single father households now. So just having 2 parents, I don't think we should discriminate.
You're right. You're right. It's just.
So, I get it. Go ahead. I'm just gonna say, because I know a lot of single fathers right now.
Well, I'm one. So yeah. So I definitely understand. You correct. It's single parent households. Let me say it that way. But it gives you context of what's going on, right? It gives you more understanding to what those effects may be. And you could see it with that, but it also shows what happens when in certain, like Morocco. Let me give you an example from another society, right? In Morocco, when women first give birth, a female family member comes in and stays with the woman. What would that do after what we learned today? That now you have another woman, a person there whose focus is on those developmental stages, right? So that's a thought process that you see in society that you may want to look into, and you can look that up. It's a process they have in Morocco, as an example of how you can address this situation slightly different, right? In Delaware, my niece, along with one of the Wilmington City Council members, is working on having doulas stay after the birth of the child for about 3 months to help in that situation, because it can be stressful. So that's what I wanted to say.
Bobby Banger, if you still with us, you want to say anything before we wrap it up? Because y'all, we've been going strong for a good 3 hours. You feel what I'm saying? My hip hurt. He might be eating y'all, but any final comments from any of our panel members right now? Hello?
Yeah. What you say, Juju? I'm sorry.
Any final comments from any of our panel members before we wrap it up? Because we way past that time.
I'm sorry. Absolutely. An amazing show. I learned so much. I'm hoping that I was able to contribute and stay on pace. Y'all were off the chain, high level information. I wish more people could see, watch, hear, listen, share, and subscribe. This was powerful, and I do look forward to being on the panel if time and you all will allow.
We allow.
Oh no, we'll have you back.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
You're pseudo official, Mac Rob. What is you talking about?
I appreciate it, y'all.
You ain't gotta ask permission. Mi casa su casa. Brass, any final words?
Well, you know me, I'm always going to go into gaming. Even after 3 hours, I'm just as fired up about the conversation as I am as when we first started, because it's helping the children. And when you have children, you know, this is one of those things that can help society. But I'm a quote unquote gamer. That's how I connect with my children. And there's some stats even in gaming that support some of this. You know, 93% of these kids are gamers. That's their friend network. You know how they used to tell us, Malcolm? Go outside and you can't come back in till the street lights come on and all of that. These kids don't. You send a child outside right now, they're gonna sit on the front steps and have no idea what exactly they're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? 93% of the children between the ages of 4 and 17 are gamers. That is terrifying, because you know what other stat it says is that these kids have killed, by the time they're 18 years old, they've killed between 1 million and 5 million people on these video games. Ooh. So imagine what that effect is on the brain. Imagine what that does in regards to respect for life. You know, the separation between. And if you look at some of these games, I walked past my son the other day playing Madden on his PlayStation, and I asked him. I thought it wasn't no games tonight. I couldn't tell the difference. So now you can, you know, then when I look back, I realized what it was. But just look at that number. These kids have literally logged on and killed each other 1 million times, between 1 million and 5 million times before they turn 18. So now, you know, you can't say that that's not impressionable, because look at now these kids that are just killing. Look at Chicago. These kids, from the time they're like 5, not 5, I don't know, but 7, 8, 9 years old. I saw that King Von documentary. It said that he was riding around with guns going out to kill kids at 9, 10, 11, 12 years old.
No, you were right about 5. Y'all don't forget that child in Virginia who shot his teacher. Wasn't he sick?
And there was another kid, and that was in Newport News. There was another kid who I always forget his story. I'll bring it up another time. Something Sandifer. He's out of Chicago. And they were talking about how they had a citywide manhunt for a kid, just for a child. These kids, you know, when you don't have any respect for life at that age, you're not going to grow up and gain it. So shows like this are important. We have to focus on the kids, and the fact that we could quantify it down to times where their brains are fertile for us to build are important. And, you know, it was 3 hours, but it was 3 good hours, and I can't wait till next week. Y'all have a happy Thanksgiving from my family to yours. And I send that back to Juju or Marcus or whoever.
Still waiting on that crab cake recipe.
Hold on. Somebody said in the chat, Vyasa, it was Yummy Sandifer. If you could look up that story, I'm going to link it in the chat. That is literally, that is a story about a child's early life going wrong. That boy did not have a chance.
Vasa is like the link king. He is a walking wiki encyclopedia, no lie. Thank you, Vasa. Shout out. But I'm gonna push back on. So, you know, I'm a firm believer and definitely when we recognize that something is not healthy for our children, to change those societal cultural norms, which video games is now. And I really think that's one thing that we need to take back. So we understand the benefits of being a gamer, though, because they're awesome benefits. But we also understand the value of exposing your children to like the outdoors and nature. Yes. And also a social environment interaction. Because a lot of times when you're gaming, yeah, you have social interaction virtually, but that's still not, you know, like eye-to-eye contact. That's not like, you know, right here, right now, person-to-person type communication or learning or building. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, that's why you find so many children that are like socially awkward, because it's one thing to be talking through text or whatnot. It's a whole nother story when you have to give a person actual eye contact and be relatable, have a conversation, be presentable or whatnot. You get what I'm saying? So please, if you have children that are gamers, fine, but please take them on a camping trip once or twice, or go outside, once a week. And I'm advocating that you do this. And I'm demanding, I'm telling you, take one day out of the week, if that's what it is, to go out, to have some outside activity with your children. Teach them how to play some volleyball, do something. If you got a beach, take them to the beach. If not, a community pool. Go to the YMCA in your neighborhood. Go play some basketball with them, something. You get what I'm saying? Play catch in the backyard. I don't know. Like, figure it out, but do something. If you need some more ideas, I got plenty of them. I just don't want to take up too much time. But I think we really need to get back with that. And, having our children interact with real life human beings. Like, let's not lose that, because, we're going to start to reap the results from losing that interpersonal connection and communication. And, I would hate to see the results of that. We're probably already seeing them, but, I think we need to reel it back in and at least let that still be a norm, going outside and interacting with real life human beings. That's my spill on that. Marcus, you got Bobby Banger. Did you want to say something? I called you earlier. I saw you. You probably
you put that link in the chat. I put it in the Discord. Please.
Sure. Bobby. Marcus, you have any final words?
Yeah, there are some research into that. Social media and the advent of that are having some odd effects. We talked about the pain, pleasure, reward, and dopamine release. And one of the ways that happens is actually physical touch. So we are, by definition, social animals. And if you ever watch any documentaries about chimps, bonobos, gorillas, you will see why touch is important. They use it as social bonding moments. It's not just about plucking ticks off of a person's body, the hominid body. It's not just that, but these are some of the things that we have to take into consideration. Sometimes we get out of the realm of that we are animals, and that these are chemical related processes that we go through. This is part of the evolutionary tale that we have as human beings. And it's important for us to recognize that because of that, because of those factors that we have, there's certain things that affect us more than it would affect someone else, right? Variations between human beings. I want everybody to remember that we're dealing with population and not individuality.
Right.
And that these lessons are there to bring us all to a clear understanding of where the science is at right now. And that doesn't mean that it won't change or more information won't become available within the next 2-3 years. Most of the science that we have about neurology, evolutionary neurology, and biology is under 20 years old, because the technology is now available for us. And so I don't want us to leave here thinking that it's hopeless either. But because of this, we can use this information to give people brains a better chance to predict a better lifestyle. So that's why I want to leave y'all with that.
So just remind everybody, like, a lot of source material that we've used for this presentation, besides 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, are in the description box. And I also put that CDC link having to do with ACEs. And I think that's a very important piece for all of you to go click that link and go through that CDC website concerning ACEs and learn more about that. And I believe also there is a link that you can actually require an ACEs test and take for yourself to see where you stand. Okay, because once we know better, we do better. I hope, at least. And just to remember to be an active part of your community. become actively engaged with your children or children that you personally have a connection with, especially when you see that there's a need. That's all I'm asking, because I do it as much as possible. Getting involved, community activities, helping with community gardens like Marcus do, because we know there's a positive effect with that. And also me helping to build the community garden in my city was to combat food deserts, right? So that was another way that I tried to become actively engaged to, eliminate some of those negative outcomes that we spoke of earlier. But with that said, once again, we thank you all for joining us. I know it's been a lot of drama and beef and rah-rah in the YouTube streets, but we did not want to thwart this show or the conversation because of it, because this is something that is actually very, very, very useful. So I hope that you all found something insightful and helpful, that you learned something here today, and that you can take it and use it. And if you have deemed this show to be worthwhile, please do share it with 3 people that they can see this, okay? And maybe just have a discussion around the part when we talked about ACEs. Like, I think that's a very important piece because it encompasses everything that we've spoken here today, okay? So you know how we do it. We got to go out with, a pseudo killer banger. And if nothing else, good night. We will see you next week at 6:45 Sunday, right here. Same time, same place. Thank you.
Thank you, teacher. Appreciate it.
We still live.
Yeah, you are. It's DQ, baby.
DQ.
Pseudo killers, what up? What up? What up? Check. Tapping in, what's the subject? Evolution or revolution, we ain't done yet. Laying flat like Sanchez, just a bomb threat. I know my flow like Angozi. Source up and show me, homie. You shut up and mute up a moment. The mad scientist, I'm knowing all the components. We own it, and we gon' off it if it's pseudo. You do know we don't entertain that keyboard judo. That big Bobby banger out of Baltimore. Done it all, shopper folks. Sold a little something, but I taught you more than your average teacher. I had to reach you at your level to bring you up. No devil can ever beat you. With precision of a magi, the information supplied by some guys get debunked on live. CK and Juju, I chill in the cut. But if you boys wanna fade, then I'm chefing you up. I organize lies, the beats of disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers. Space age Africans, back again. An organized lie, the beats of disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers. Space age Africans, tapping in. I always been fly, that's an actual omen. You can catch me in the sky, ask Anthony Bowman. He see me with his telescope, I was actually floating. I'm some good kush, the Sabio is actually growing. See, Gullah and Kent is where the money gets spent. Them boys got some books that cost as much as your rent. The second verse should be smash rock well, but I rock well. Underground like Sumerian rock wells. In the ring like I'm the rock whale. Hell, create a different wave that can rock whales. Hell, shit swell like lunar tides. My entendres off Gandra to who describe. Euthanize foolish guys. Scholastically, haphazardly, turn your camera on and look me in my eyes. And please do subscribe. 8 to 80, blind, cripple, or crazy. You in for a new surprise. It's DQ, a organized lie. The beats of disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers. Space age Africans, back again. An organized lie. The beats of disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers. Space age Africans, tapping in.